very excited for the first Simply SaaS Forum. My name is John Birdsong. I'm with the Atlanta Ventures team, and welcome. Yes, first one. You all should be proud. We want today to be something that is very helpful. We've got 4 speakers and then an interview. All of the speakers are in the trenches building businesses from sales side, marketing side, engineering side, and the culture side. And what's really exciting about today are all of the entrepreneurs who are building companies. We want to progress the companies or your professional careers and really focus on SaaS, right? Our belief at Atlanta Ventures is the Southeast is highly underserved from a programming perspective, from a capital perspective, and we want to fix that. And so we're inviting folks from all over the Southeast. I know today we have folks in from Florida. We have folks in from Athens, which is great. We have folks in from Nashville. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you have very actionable tips that you can take back to your business or to your role and make that happen. So why are we here, right? At Atlanta Ventures, and a lot of the Atlanta Ventures team is scattered throughout, and we'll make sure you guys connect with them. But we at Atlanta Ventures want to serve entrepreneurs through content, community, and capital. So with content and community, we've created this Simply SaaS brand. We took a page from some of the great companies that we've seen, examples, Terminus, where they've created the Flip My Funnel. Simply SaaS is open to everyone and really focuses on entrepreneurs and SaaS professionals to improve their company and their career. Another big reason is, yesterday, it's funny, things move so fast in this world, right, in software as a service. Yesterday we had Mayor 59, so Kasim Reed. He was in the building, and we were connecting with him and talking about what he's going to do for the next 8 years. And we were thinking back, and at the beginning of his second term, so late 2013, 2014, if you think about some of the greatest businesses the greatest SaaS businesses in Atlanta that have made phenomenal progress, right? So companies like Saleslofts, Qgenda, CallRail, Calendly, Terminus. 4 years ago, these businesses were barely even making any money, right? And fast forward today, they have hundreds of employees, they're servicing thousands of businesses, and things move so fast. And so there's a huge need, our belief, through connecting entrepreneurs, connecting people who have a belief that SaaS is the future, and that's why we're here today. So let's get started. I want to first introduce Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett, come on up, Tony, as you get started. So welcome, Tony. Tony has a wide variety of experience in sales. She started at UPS, transitioned to one of the top-selling sales reps at Pardot. I'll never forget walking into the Pardot office and seeing the leaderboard of the successful reps, and of course, her avatar was, of course, Tony Bennett. I left my heart in San Francisco, Tony Bennett, not this Tony Bennett. And since then, she has led the team at VP of Sales at Terminus. She started when there was 50K of ARR, and now they're over 15 million in ARR. So lots of stories of ups and downs. And welcome to the stage, Tony Bennett. Thank you all.
Thank you. This just goes forward. Hey guys, can you hear me okay? Cool. All right, I'm excited to be here. A couple of things before I start. So first, I talk fast, especially when I'm excited, so I will probably talk kind of fast. Sorry about that. Second, my slide deck is, maybe not the prettiest one you'll see today. Our company designer is out on vacation, so hopefully at least I can provide some value. I don't claim to be an expert on scaling a company, but I can share my experience at Terminus. So hopefully it's helpful. So first, super quick background. Great introduction by John, but when I started at Terminus, I joined in May of 2015 as a 9th employee. I inherited 1 account executive and 1 SDR. And when I came on board, we had a couple customers. Our co-founders had sold a couple deals, a couple paying customers. So effectively almost 0 in revenue, but a completed, although basic product. The first year, from April to December, we grew from 0 to $1 million in revenue. We made it on the night before Christmas Eve to that $1 million mark. In 2016, we grew from 1 to 5 million, hit that 5 million mark the night before Christmas Eve, which was awesome. And then this past year, we were able to more than double our revenue. We also acquired a company, which attributes to some of the revenue. With that said, we've had explosive growth. I attribute that a little bit to our awesome execution, but in large part, we got a little luck on our side. We got into a market that was exploding, which made things really nice. So with that said, I'm going to chat a little bit about my experience going from 0 to $1 million, some tips on landing your first sales, and then how to scale your initial team. These are pictures. This was the early team. I actually think this was early 2016, the early Terminus team. This is me and our CEO, Eric Spett, meeting Kumail from Silicon Valley at Dreamforce that year. So very fun time. So yes, these are the 2 things we'll talk about. Let's start with how to land your first $1 million in sales. So first, my advice is get a proven salesperson to lead your sales effort. I think this hire is really tricky, so you should take your time and be slow, and hopefully this doesn't offend anyone, but a lot of startup founders are really bad at hiring salespeople. Our co-founders had 2 failed sales hires before me, and the one that I inherited didn't last very long either. So tips on this. 1, make sure to find an up-and-comer. You don't want to go out and get that VP of sales from IBM. Not that most of us as startups can afford that person anyway, but their background, their experience is going to be of one where they already have a lot of resources at their disposal. You need someone scrappy, ideally someone with a chip on their shoulder, someone who's willing to come in and work hard to prove themselves for you. At the same time, you need someone with a track record for success. So ideally, someone has sold before and has sold in your industry. I think part of what made me a good fit at Terminus is I had been selling to marketing for several years before I came on board. So in an early startup, there's a lot you're trying to figure out about product market fit. And so if you find someone who has sold with success into your vertical or to your buyer before, there's a lot of things you're just going to know about how to communicate, respond to that buyer, how they like to be communicated with. That just would help them to ramp up more quickly. I'll also say, and this is from some great things that happened at Terminus and some failed attempts at Terminus, set clear expectations for the first sales hire or hires. I'm lucky enough that at Terminus, I was essentially the first sales hire. I have grown into a VP of sales position. I feel so blessed to still be leading the team there. That does not always happen. In fact, that's normally not the norm. In most cases, that first person will help you close a lot of deals, and it doesn't mean they're going to grow into a leader at all or may not scale with the business, and that's fine. So I would set the expectation up front that as long as you perform and you execute for our business, we will find ways to grow your career. I would not promise them any kind of position or title in the future because you just don't know if you can offer that to them. It's just kind of a word of caution. Also, check references. It's hard to hire salespeople. Even as a salesperson, I would like to say I have a pretty high radar for bullshit, but it's still really hard for me to hire salespeople today. So we do this step in our interview process for account executives today where we make them come in and essentially go through a sales process of Terminus, our product, to us. It's interesting because there are people in the first in-person interview that I will love. Then they come in and they cannot sell Terminus, and vice versa. So find a way to make this person prove to you that they can actually sell and they can actually do this job. So find some kind of practical. Maybe have them shadow your business for a day. Give them 3 days to go make a business plan and come back and pitch your product to you. In the early days, I completely built out our go-to-market message, our strategy, how we demoed the product, how we talked about the product. Of course, with tons of input from our co-founders, but I kind of led that charge. You need someone who's got the ability to help create that go-to-market message for you. So you want to test them. And lastly, if you have a sales leader who's a friend, I recommend that you get them to support you, maybe have coffee with the person to help you vet them out. Next, sell vision over product or sell the dream. What this does not mean is lie about what you do or exaggerate what you do. That's a great way to build a terrible reputation. However, something that worked really well for us early was selling vision over just what our product did, because our product was very simple, as most of our products are in the early stages of a company. So tips on this. Create an impossibly big vision and mission for your company. Get your salespeople rallied around this vision. Make that vision so big it's probably impossible to achieve, but great salespeople are not just money motivated, they're also excited to be part of something bigger. And so once you do that, I'll give you a quick example of something that we did. So early Terminus, all our product did was serve ads to certain personas in target accounts. So if we had gone to market and said, this product's really great, it will enable you to select the people you want to target and target them with ads, and then you can see how they're engaging with your ads. That's not terribly compelling. So instead, we would tell stories to help get the person to understand the bigger vision. We would say things like, imagine what you're doing in marketing today. Most of your efforts are limited to your database, like email, and are reactive. You have to wait for someone to come to you. But according to Topo, less than 15% of your target accounts are coming to you. So how do you go get the other 85%? Our product is going to enable you to proactively go find people who are the right fit for what you do and bring them to you. And then you want to target someone like a CEO. That person's never going to fill out a form on your website. They're not going to respond to a cold call. And they're probably not going to respond to an email. So how can you get their attention? Well, picture this. CEO sits down in his office, looks out his window, sees a big banner that says, buy Terminus. Every 5 miles on his way home from work, buy Terminus, buy Terminus. Goes to pick up his kid from daycare, buy Terminus. That's essentially what we're doing for you digitally. So find ways to tell stories that make your simple product features bigger. Next, and this is kind of related, challenge your prospect to see the world differently. So if you guys have read The Challenger Sale, how many people have read that book? It's probably impossible to do the full-scale model in a small company, but my big takeaway from that book is if you can challenge your prospect's worldview, they will then trust you more because you've built credibility that you can provide them with valuable insight versus just talk to them about a product. So here's an example of how we did that. Before we ever showed a demo of our product, we always went through this with prospects, potential customers. We'd say something to the effect of, before we dive into the product, I want to give you some context on what we're trying to help you achieve in your business. Let's talk about ABM. Account-based marketing. So on the left is the traditional lead-based funnel. We kind of explain it. According to Forrester, less than 1% of leads turn into revenue. This model works. Lots of great companies have been built on this model, but is it the most effective way to build your business? Enter account-based marketing. By flipping the funnel, you're identifying best fit accounts. You're then putting all your marketing and sales effort into only those accounts. So you want to expand your reach to the whole buying committee, engage them with compelling personalized messages so that you can ultimately drive advocates and customers. It's a very short version. But all that to say, Terminus fits into this here and here. We're going to enable you to drive X outcomes as a part of that strategy. So then when we go into our product, our simple little product that takes 5 minutes to demo, we've now started getting them in the right mindset of what they're going to see and making this feel like a much more powerful thing than a small platform that has 3 pages in it. So those are some thoughts on how to get your message out. how to start scaling your sales team. So once, I don't remember the exact revenue when we hired our second rep. Like I said, I inherited one guy. So he and I sold pretty much our first $1 million for the business together. So I was leading the team, building all the stuff in Salesforce, all the building things you do in a startup as well as selling. And so probably around $600K is when we made a second sales hire, so the end of Q3 that year. And then we made our third hire in December, so he didn't really contribute until the next year. All that to say, though, I think it's really important that as you scale that early team, you've got to get the right people or you're wasting a lot of your time and your resources, because salespeople are expensive. Any bad hire is expensive. Hire for grit, passion, and hustle over experience. Even today, I still would take this as a rule of thumb, but especially early. In the early days, I would rather have someone who's hungry, who shows me that he wants to commit to the bigger vision of our company and is going to work his ass off, than someone with a super impressive resume from, I don't know, a Salesforce or an Oracle. You want to look for someone who knows they've got to hustle in a startup. This is not easy. Some days the product might not work. This is not going to be easy, but if you're willing to come in and commit, this could make your career. So you want to make sure you hire the right kind of person. Make your team feel invested in success. I have for sure not done everything right, but I think one thing I did get right early on is we made sure our team knew that this was our company, this was our thing to build together. So I would never go to them and say, here's what we're going to do. It was always, hey, I think we should revise our sales stages. You guys have been selling this for a while now. Can you get together, think about how you think this should go, based on your experience, come present to me what you think we should do. I would take that, I would then figure out what we should do, using as much of what they gave me as possible, and then come back to them. And then it was as if we had built this thing together. Or when we roll out a new policy, always prefacing that if this doesn't work, I promise we'll scale it back. Let's try it. Like, I would be willing to change this back if we do this full force and it doesn't work. But if I can't tell that you're really committing to it, then we're just going to keep doing it. So find ways to get them feeling like they're part of this journey. Because think about the person you're hiring early. What crazy person wants to come work for a startup when they can go work for Salesforce.com and make 120K base? It's the kind of person who wants to be, I love someone raised his hand in the back. It's the kind of person like me and probably like a lot of you who wants to be a part of building something bigger than themselves. So you got to make that person feel like they are part of the journey. Set proper incentives. Early on, I kind of came in and said, all right, we have to set a goal, but I don't know what that goal should be. So I'm going to make something up. If we don't hit it, but I can see that you guys are working really hard towards this goal, we'll reduce the goal. If we kill it, I'm going to raise it. Let's just do our best and figure out where things fall. And if you've hired the right people, it shouldn't be an issue. And then over time, you start to understand what your goals need to be. Multitask. I'm sure that's obvious. Something that our CEO, Eric, advice he gave me that was super valuable. I would always complain that I was struggling to prioritize my time and get things done. It was hard to slow down enough to build something. So he would say, don't try to slow down and build something. Do it as you're doing the thing. It's probably not a good way to say it. Example. An example would be training. So the next time I had a new hire, started with this person and said, hey, I need you to help me scale our hiring program. So as I'm training you live, can you just write down everything I'm talking about, take great notes? They'd put it in Drive, share it with me. At the end of the day, I'd go home and spend 15 to 30 minutes organizing their notes. Next time around that I trained someone, they had that page of notes. Okay, add to this page of notes. Let's figure out what we need to do from here. And every time we built on that until eventually we had some form of a playbook. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't pretty. There wasn't a lot of, there's probably misspelled words and things in it. But it gave us a document to keep building on, which helped with consistency versus me spending 2 days off site just trying to plot out how to train someone. It's very hard to find that time early on. Think short-term and long-term. Again, probably kind of confusing advice, but what this means to me is it's hard to know sometimes what should I slow down and do well and what do I need to speed through because I have a million priorities. So a mistake I made early on was underestimating how important a hiring profile was. I was just flying by the seat of my pants. This person feels like a good fit. And then I realized over time, this is something I should slow down and think about and build a profile for and meticulously update. As I hire people, what do my top performers have in common? And today at Terminus, we have 4 key traits we look for in successful reps. We know how to test, to vet for those in our interview process. We know how to put people on the spot in ways we can uncover if they have those things. So that was something I needed to slow down and really put energy into. However, there are other things that you should just make a quick decision and move on. Some things in Salesforce are permanent, but for the most part, whether or not to add this field or that field in Salesforce, just put something in there and move on. So I think, you gotta move fast, but you gotta know when to slow down. And so my best advice, I did not get it perfect, and I still don't do this perfect, is at least take enough time to think, how important is this thing in the scope of our business? We need awesome people. Hiring is really important. Or the flip side of that. So we're close on time. In our last few minutes, I thought, why not provide a few thoughts on lessons from the journey after $1 million ARR. First lesson, it doesn't get easier. This at first said everything gets harder, and my husband, who just started a business last year, was like, that is not true. That is 100% not true. The early stage is really hard. So I changed it to, it doesn't get easier. You're like, yes, we've got over $1 million in recurring revenue. We have 60 customers. We're awesome. Well, what happens when those customers start churning? What happens when the product's having problems? It starts to get really challenging. For me, I think it got more challenging. For a co-founder, perhaps it's not the same story. But don't take your success for granted. Make sure that you don't get ahead of yourself and you really slow down to think, at every step, how can we make things better? How can we prevent future problems? Just because people bought this product doesn't mean people will continue buying this product. Be a problem solver. Something I had to do a lot of early on is spend a lot of time with customer success. What's working, what's not working? When a customer's unhappy or they leave us, why? How can we better make our message, set the right expectations up front to minimize churn? And then, of course, how do we improve the product to minimize churn? So, again, for us, it was like once we got over that $1 million mark, there were a lot of business challenges we had in making sure a team was delivering a consistent message every time, but also making sure that we kept tabs on how to continue to improve. You will face big challenges. There will be days where, again, your product doesn't work, or a competitor suddenly pops out of nowhere, and you're like, crap, what they have is kind of cool. You have to stay positive and keep believing in what you're doing. A lot of great teams win because they believe in their cause. At Terminus, we get a little cheesy, especially one of our co-founders, Sanger, and we kind of pick on him because everything is the best thing ever. But you really have to stay positive and remember, why are we doing what we're doing? What is the bigger vision that helps you stay sane, but also you will face hard times. I think we are almost up on time. And work towards a scalable model, but don't expect scalability. At the $1 million mark, you are not a scalable company, at least we weren't. We were still figuring things out. Every quarter, things change. It's like, yeah, this is finally the quarter. We're 8 quarters in, or 9 quarters in. We can use our metrics to make proper goals. But then something would change to make the old data completely irrelevant. So you're not scalable yet, so you have to do your best to make data-driven decisions, but know that things will continue to change. The game will change a lot, so you can't only look at the past as an indicator for where you're going to go. Yes, I'm done. You can go.
Let's give it up for Tony. All right, we have 8 minutes for questions, so for anyone that wants to, question number 1.
How you doing, Tony? So for a SaaS company, with your product offering, obviously you guys were new to the market. Did you find that a lot of the prospects that you were working with wanted to do a proof of concept to prove out your product first before moving to kind of that subscription-based model?
Totally. Early on, we did, the first thing that I did when I came in was stopped month-to-month contracts. Our co-founders were selling anything. Stopped month-to-month contracts, but we did quarterlies for probably the first year. It's not ideal. Your board won't like that, but you just need to do what you can do to get customers in and happy and using you. So we try to make it very easy. Our terms of service were simple. We would take any kind of payment method, like anything. So we did quarterly contracts. Once we hit the $1 million mark, we started shifting away from those. We probably let some linger for like the next 6 months from there. And then we pressed for at least 6-month terms. We're still doing some 6-month terms, selling into MarTech. Everybody wants a proof of concept, and some of our competitors allow 3- and 6-month terms. We are trying to push exclusively towards annual, and hopefully we'll be able to do so by the end of this year. I think there's a balance between do what you need to do to get your first customers on board and prove to them that you can provide value for them. But as soon as you see that there is value, you got to start increasing your deal size and forcing a longer term.
Thank you. Tony, just 2 quick questions. One, what was the name of the book? And then you had mentioned there were 4 traits you look for in salespeople. What are those?
The book, The Challenger Sale? Yes. Yeah, and 4 key traits we look for. 1 is communication. Not just can you speak and communicate clearly, but our buyer likes really friendly reps. They don't like corporate-y kinds of, they just don't respond well to that. We sell to marketers. They want someone friendly and kind. That's important. Hustle. We're still not the kind of place where I'm going to give you 100 accounts to farm. It's hard work. So we need someone who's willing to put in the effort needed. We look for coachability. There's a lot changing in our market and in our product. So we need someone who can take feedback, put it into play very quickly. And then the last one is adaptability/intelligence. Our HR person said we can't call it intelligence anymore, but how quickly can you pick up on a new concept, put it into play? It's similar to coachability, but adapt to all the things going on. Our reps who are able to take a new concept or talk track, put it in play the next day, are just going to see faster success than the ones that really need to take their time and work with the material. So those 4 things have been big for us.
So Tony, what's your preferred source when you look for salespeople? Where do you go first?
Early on, I wanted only people who sold into MarTech who had 3 to 5+ years of experience because I didn't have bandwidth to train them. Now, it just depends. Like a lot of the MarTech companies I would love to recruit from, like Pardot, which is now Salesforce, and Marketo, are more, I don't want to say corporate, that's not really fair, but are just in a different place than we are. So those reps actually don't transfer very well to us. We're hiring a lot of people from CareerBuilder right now. A lot of them, they had a culture similar to ours, and a lot of them have a really good work ethic. I haven't found one place consistently, but ultimately, again, looking for someone, now I look for people who are a little bit younger in their career, who want to be coached and developed, who are willing to put in the hard work.
Hi, Tony. You mentioned the Challenger Sales book. I'll go back to that. So are you having any issues scaling with that model? In other words, you need domain-specific knowledge to be able to effectively challenge your customers. How's that working as you're scaling?
Yeah, good question. We're still definitely following it. Again, we don't follow it to the letter of the law like the book talks about, but we're still in a place where we can't really sell without that because what we are doing requires a change in the way they're measuring success and reporting things to their CEO. So we need them to believe this, to buy into this, so they'll sell it to their CEO or let us help them do that. So it does make training harder. I also try to use it as a place or a way to sell people on the concept of like, this is a challenging role that also makes it really freaking exciting. We're taking a new message to the market, challenging the way people are doing things. And so we kind of hire people who are bought into the fact that that's how we're going to approach it.
And you said set proper incentives in the early days without a lot of history. How did you go about doing that?
So one quick tangent, one mistake I've seen a lot of co-founders make is they look at another company, like ours used to always look at Saleslofts, and say, let's do what Saleslofts does. Well, Saleslofts was ahead of us. They had been around longer than us. They sold to a different audience. That's not helpful, but it is good to look at that and say, what are they benchmarking? Let's pick something similar. So I looked at a couple similar companies here at ATV and then chose a number which I thought was challenging but very reasonable. And surprisingly, it ended up being the number that stayed our quota for about 2 years. But that, I got lucky. I don't think that was like, but if it hadn't been, I would have changed it.
Hi, thanks for the information. My question is, what are the actual sales tactics that you use to get to the first million? So for example, were you guys cold calling, had an email strategy, did webinars, things like that? And then How did that change from 1 million to 5 million? And did you see like something that worked and you guys like continuously repeated that?
Great question. So we still to this day don't get a whole lot of inbound. Surprisingly, for a marketing and MarTech company, you'd think we have all the inbounds. We don't. So it's a lot of hard work. So I have an SDR team. It used to be a 2 SDR to 1 AE ratio in the early days. Now it's 1 to 1. They do a lot of work to cold call, email, social touches, which works really well for marketing. We do videos in our outreach. They do a lot of really creative work. The way it changed, it hasn't changed drastically, but as an ABM company, we finally actually started doing ABM, which we should have been doing from the beginning. So we've had a huge transformation in getting way more targeted and letting our reps only work 100 target accounts, be super personalized into those accounts, and better use our own product to help nurture that buying committee. So if you want to talk more about that later, I would be happy to. Cool.
Great, Tony. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We now have the marketing, and I would like to introduce Tammy McQueen, and wrote something for all of the folks. So Tammy McQueen moved from her native South Africa to the States on a tennis scholarship. After her collegiate career was over, she doubled down on marketing, communications, and branding. She spent 3 years as the director of marketing for Saleslofts, where some amazing marketing campaigns were enacted, like the fake Mark Benioff. Since her days at Saleslofts, she has co-founded 31 South, which is a full-service marketing agency that works with dozens of SaaS companies on going to market locally and on the West Coast. Please welcome Tammy McQueen.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having some old OG Saleslofts in the back there. Thank you so much for having me. I would love to just walk you through a little bit about what I've done in the past, what I'm currently working on, and how you can apply a lot of these SaaS principles to what you're doing today. So I'm not from around here. I'm originally from Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm born and raised. I played tennis competitively growing up. There's a point at which you reach 5'2" and you're not going pro. So I played Division I tennis in Kentucky, moved around a little bit, and I have called Atlanta home for the past 8 years. My background goes everywhere from corporate America, nonprofit world that really moves and tugs on the heartstrings quite a bit, and that infiltrates in a lot of what I do, to Saleslofts, and now at 31 South. A little bit of background, I am on the board of directors for the Cooler Project. It is a nonprofit that invests in families and businesses in East Africa, as well as the Global Conservation Corps, where we focus on protecting rhinos in Southern Africa. And I run the global social media for Women Who Code, 137,000 members globally in 60 cities and 20 countries. So definitely trying to bridge the nonprofit with the startup hustle as well. All right, 31 South, we are a full-service creative marketing and ad agency. We are based here in the Tech Village. We have clients that we serve across the US and a few in different parts of the world as well. Have an incredible group of founders that bring a vast background to the table, and would love to talk to you a little bit more about it afterwards. And so today, what I want to talk to you about, as well as not only what we've done at Saleslofts and leading to today, but also key takeaways that you can look at that are tangible, that you're going to walk away from the next, I think I'm at 18 minutes right now, and really put those in your pocket and put them to use immediately. Because all too often, I think a lot of us, and this is why I love what Atlanta Ventures has done with the SaaS Forum, is allow you to take takeaways from each of these rapid-fire sessions and put them to work immediately. Before you boo me out the room, I really want to tell you about why B2B companies just don't get it. They don't. They have a lot of resources at hand, everything that they could possibly have. They have a great talent pool, whether you're here in Atlanta or on the West Coast, in the Bay Area, you have great resources to talent. It is the thing to do. Join a startup. You want to hustle hard, get the great experience, work with incredible people who have done it before. But what I want to talk about is that B2B companies just don't get it in marketing. And this is why. It is so important for companies to create meaningful connections that go beyond the surface, that are truly authentic and transparent in their communications. And this is why brands need to start behaving like people and really look at it from an empathetic standpoint. And this is why I think innovation has been stifled. We are heavily focused on the metrics. We are heavily focused at how we are influencing revenue, and why I think that is incredibly important that we know at what stage of the funnel we are influencing the overall revenue, the overall growth of the company, and scale. We cannot lose sight of how we are truly impacting a brand through the art of persuasion. And I do believe that this is a lost art form right now, because the B2C companies that you see in the market are truly focused on an empathetic approach, understanding what it is that makes their consumer tick. And all too often in marketing, in B2B, we look at what we want to do. I've been there, I've done it, I've been on the wrong side of it and done something that I wanted to do in a B2B marketing sense that was not right for the consumer. And I think that's what we really need to stay focused on. And so we need to start communicating like humans, not just pushing our products, not just selling what we are selling, not just pushing a product. And I think that is where Saleslofts truly found a lot of success in the early days, was being helpful, understanding what the problem was. When Saleslofts launched, we were at a point where the industry was not even thought of. Sales development industry was right at the cutting edge. And we started looking at how we can solve a problem. What is the challenge that people are facing? And talking to that. A lot of the content we produced gave insight on why the process was important. The process drove the sale of the product, and really spoke to a lot of the initiatives that led the marketing at large. We understood the challenges that they were facing. We understood some of the problems in the industry, and that is how we leveraged a lot of the influencers as well. And so, as I talk through the 3 ways to humanize your brand and connect with your consumers, I'll give references to what some of the things we did at Saleslofts and what we're doing today as well. Create indelible experiences. This is so important for not only if you're hosting an event, listening to a roundtable with your customers, or really focusing on your influencers, your raving fans, but create these experiences that people will never forget. That experience does not start when they walk through those doors. That experience starts with the invite. How do you gain their attention? How do you bring them into the room that they cannot wait to be there? If they are traveling from another state to come to your event, you are so lucky that they decided to get on the plane and come to you. Treat them that way and create this experience that they will tell the story. Yes, I can tell you all the metrics of what we did at Saleslofts, but I can tell you the experiences we created that people are able to then share that story with others. And that is how the sort of the brand grows and amplifies with a lot of the trigger events that you're hosting, a lot of different applications for bringing your customers into a room and truly listening to them. That is your greatest source of how your product is going to scale. Creating indelible experiences was something that we did with Saleslofts Rainmaker. It started in 2015 with 200 people down the road at the W Buckhead. We had 200 people coming into the room, and I remember putting a line item on the budget saying T-shirts, $1,200. Those T-shirts were not T-shirts. They were the Falcons drumline, and we were going to just shake it up a little bit. So everyone was in the room, first Salesloft Rainmaker, and shut out the lights and kicked them back on, and came the Falcons drumline. Truly gave a great start to the event, it got people fired up, woke them up, whatever it may be. And then found this momentum. What the team looked at was, how do we create this wow factor over and over? And it became something that, oh, what are they going to do next year? How are they going to top this? And so the following year, we had gospel choir come in and go down the aisles and really just get the crowd going. The next year, hosted the Stomp group, which has brooms on the stage and pieces of trash cans, and really just fired it up a little bit. And so this became a signature event. This year, Salesloft really looked at how that experience spoke to the brand itself and to the community. And they hosted an acoustic singer on stage, which was truly a great bridge to what they do with the product and the company. And what you're going to see with all three of these ways to humanize your brand is going to build community and your brand. So I think that is something that we often don't think about when we're always tracking metrics. And I'm far off the charts of that indelible experience idea, and I'm willing to stand outside on the intersection here of Lennox and Piedmont with an iPad tracking leads if I need to, and getting you to fill out a form just so that we can create these different opportunities. Incorporate human-centric design, and generally what this means is being empathetic to who you are creating and designing for. Understand what it is that helps them ingrain and root into what is meaningful for their product, for their service, and for their community. Love the one you're with. I like to use the pun here, love the wine you're with. We're going to go with love the one you're with. And this is championing your customers. They are your number one most important thing you can do in your organization. And how marketing plays such an important role in this is that there are so many ways that you can champion your customer. Whether you have limited resources or a $1 million budget, you can really find a way to make them feel special. Not only listen to the feedback that they are giving you, but something as small as sending them some cookies or leveraging something even larger, such as Sendoso or PFL, where they will send your customers and prospects at your different tiered accounts special goods to their office. And it's not just about sending personalized golf balls. Think beyond that. Think about how can you send your biggest customer a roll-in guacamole cart or margarita mix on a Friday afternoon for them to enjoy happy hour. No one's doing that in B2B. I can promise you that now. Send Freddie the Falcon with lunch. Do something that gets them to remember it, but do it for the whole team, not just your point of contact, not just your VP of sales and your CMO. Do it for the entire team, because you know what? They're leveraging your product, they're using your service, and they need to feel loved too. Some things that we did at Salesloft for Rainmaker, we, in the dead of winter, got a pedicab in New York City. They don't operate in winter. So this pedicab was the only one in the streets of New York City, decked it out, wrapped it in Rainmaker branding, went through the streets, and you'll see we made little fake sort of tickets from New York to Atlanta. And we gave every one of our customers in New York 2 free tickets to attend the conference. And I think this is a great opportunity that looks at them, they look at us and they say, wow, they came up to New York just for us to give us free tickets to attend the event. That means a lot. If someone came and knocked on your door from San Francisco and gave you a free ticket to their event or something that they were doing, you would feel pretty special. And I think it's important to show appreciation. if you're hosting an event at a conference, if you're going to Dreamforce or Inbound or one of these larger scale events, think about how you can really champion your customer at the event. They're all going to be there. Your prospects are going to be there, and so are your competitors. So think about hosting a little happy hour or a kickoff in the morning with mimosas and Bloody Marys, and have it just for your customers in your booth or at a specific venue that's nearby. Everyone's going to be there. Everyone's going to want to feel loved and part of it. Again, builds community, builds brand. And one thing is, innovation is not about following trends. I would really recommend that you don't look at your competitors all the time for your ideas on marketing. Everyone is creating ebooks, everyone's creating blogs, everyone's doing webinars, but how do you look beyond that? How do you create an opportunity for your own company that is not like your competitor, that you're not going to market like them? How can you look at a B2C industry? How can you look at nonprofits? Who are some of the brands that really grab your attention? There's a great startup based out of New Zealand called Allbirds, and their shoes are it's like walking on clouds. It's the most comfortable brand ever, and what they're doing is really unique. And looking at what they do from a B2B standpoint is really inspiring. It shows some innovation, and I would recommend that you start looking beyond your bubble and who's next to you and who's fighting you in that G2 crowd quadrants. Look beyond that. And think about true disruption in marketing, especially from a standpoint of what's never been done. And I'll tell you, more often than not, ideas are so easy. They are a dime a dozen, but executing on them and really having the guts to go for it is what differentiates you. You can have a ton of these ideas, but actually following through is probably one of the scariest things. It becomes a lot more scarier when you start having investors involved and your board involved, and really there's a little bit more red tape to that. So when you're really breaking out, I'd say go for it. Break the rules. This is something that we did quite a bit at Saleslofts, and we were a little bit cheeky about it, I think. When we were scrappy, we had very little resources, and it's truly one of my favorite stories, as John mentioned, about breaking the rules, and the Benioff story, which I'll get to. But host a periphery event around one of the big conferences. All too often, you're going to see that at an early stage, I hear, how do we possibly afford $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for a booth at Dreamforce? There are 100,000 people. How do we stand out? If you're going to something specifically in your vertical, how do we stand out at Oracle World or Atlassian Summit? And I think one of the big things is you can truly captivate an audience with a periphery event around a trigger event. So what you need to do is look at how can you host a breakfast, a brunch, a whiskey tasting. How can you really captivate the people that are already there, the influencers who are there, and bring them to a location and host an event? And this is something we did just last week. We are currently doing the ICO, initial coin offering, for Monetizer, a Techstars-based company, on their 6-city roadshow. And last week, 10,000 people joined, came to 3 back-to-back conferences in Puerto Rico, where they truly wanted to restart the community. Still, 40% of people in Puerto Rico don't have electricity and power. And so what happened is these conferences came together and said, we're going to give back all the proceeds from the events and help restart the island. And so what we did was hosted an event on top of these 3 back-to-back conferences for Monetizer. We put a billboard up in Puerto Rico. Everyone passes it, coming from the airport to the location where it was hosted on the initial days and when they were leaving. And so we found this gorgeous location that really worked well for people that were attending and created an experience for them, for people that were attending. There was no pitching, there was no selling. It was truly come have a great time. And through a lot of the marketing, we were looking to get 50 people to this event. at the day we opened up the doors last Thursday night, we had 452 signups. And so that is truly through creating a great opportunity for people to come together, bring everyone, influencers in the industry together for a great night, have a great location, and follow up. Create a cadence of emails that remind them, we're so glad you're going to be there. 3 days before the event, looking forward to it. These are the details. This is how you get there. The day of, a reminder, and immediately follow up with it as well, with whether it's your white paper, whether it is the next steps, join us on the next roadshow, whatever it may be. And get kicked out. This was my KPI for my very first event with Saleslofts. And it worked in the very, very early days. And since we matured from what we did, it's always a fun story to tell. And there's a great post on it online about how we impersonated Mark Benioff and put out a Craigslist ad. Those were the sneakers that we impersonated and made. It was still the old Saleslofts logo. And so that was a lot of fun. Had an opportunity to eventually meet the real Mark Benioff. And shout out to John Birdsong for posting, cited a fresh-shaved Benioff grabbing breakfast with Japanese consulate at event. We got all the Atlanta companies, Dreamforce that year, to please post about this, and created a great story. And that's a story, again, that creates an experience that we've told. I can't even tell you the number of times. I wish I had a dollar for every time I told that story. And so be bold. I think try new things. Give it a shot. If you're scared to give the ideas a shot, try it. If you just do 10% of what that 100% of the idea is, I think you'll make a big impact. And look beyond B2B. Please try something new. Everyone is doing a blog, a white paper, a webinar. Let's look at how you can shake that up. Even in the delivery of that communication of how you do it, I'd give it a shot. And so I'd love to answer any questions. If I want to continue a conversation, I'm available afterwards and on LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much.
Let's give it up for Tammy. Woo! Lots of good tidbits. All right, let's introduce Hubert. Hubert Liu. Woo! He was the first engineer and CTO at Rigor for 7 years. He's seen every part of the technical process required to scale a business to $4 million in ARR. Recently, Hubert has transitioned full-time to the Atlanta Ventures team, where he now supports companies in the Atlanta Ventures family and helps build helpful web apps for entrepreneurs across the Southeast. A great example is the Simple Strategic Plan, simplestrategicplan.com. When Hubert is not building software or spending time with his family, he's obsessively making the case that LeBron James is the greatest basketball player of all time. So welcome to the stage, Hubert Liu. Thank you, Hubert.
Thanks, John. We're going to talk about product engineering. If you guys haven't seen this meme before, if you ask somebody that doesn't know how to do software, like what they think it is, that's pretty much what it is. Like, do some stuff, and then there it is. So kind of like what John said about me. So I started at Georgia Tech many years ago, not too long ago, and I was doing computer science. Around my third or fourth year, I was like, I'm never coding for a living. This is the worst thing ever. Around 2009, I started interning at a company called Pardot. This is before Salesforce was attached to the name, and I worked on internal tools there. So when I graduated, I was like, oh, coding is actually pretty cool. Pardot was awesome. It was a very good culture fit for me. So I graduated, and we started this company called Rigor, where I was CTO for 7 years. So Rigor does web performance. So I just recently, about 6 months ago, transitioned into this role at Atlanta Ventures, where I'm now, like John said, working on tools like simplestrategicplan.com. So please check that out. So why are we here? So hopefully your revenue graph looks like that. And if it doesn't, then you can pretend it does for now. And there is a lot of things that happen when you start to scale your company. So a lot of these things are things that I've heard personally, and things like we're moving too slow, yet we're also moving too fast. And kind of like what we've talked about earlier today, things that worked at one stage don't necessarily work in the next. Your team and your company are going to go very quickly, and that can outpace your individual's growth as they try to catch up to the company. So what I want to do today is try to help you make sense of these changes as they pretty much happen to everybody. And this is kind of the equivalent of the how to understand your changing body talk that you give to your teenagers. So at Atlanta Ventures, we've defined companies within 3 stages. So the idea stage, where you're building your MVP. As you get customers and you figure out where you fit in the market, you're going to hit the product market fit stage, where you're working towards a repeatable business. And then as you figure it out and you can hit the scaling stage, you have an established repeatable business, and you know that for every dollar you're going to put in, you know where it's going to go, you know what it's going to do, and you know how it's going to be multiplied when it comes out. So there are 3 categories that kind of evolve as your team evolves in relation to product engineering. So the first one is your people, which is obviously your team. Your communication, which are going to be how your internal teams interact with each other, but also how your teams interact with your customers. And then the technology. So the technology is either your product itself, or it's the infrastructure that supports your product. So starting with the idea stage. So in this stage, you're going to have probably 1 or 2 engineers, depending on how technical your co-founders are, or your founders. And they're typically going to be self-starting prototypers, which are, they operate with very little instruction. You tell them to go do something, they go do it, they ask questions later. The CEO operates as your product owner, so to help drive the product. And then everyone does customer success and does support. So communication in this stage is probably the easiest out of all stages. This is the stage that we're most familiar with. So we're sitting we're sitting next to each other in an office, if you have one, and you're always talking, whiteboarding. You kind of just, if you have a problem, you just text the other person and say, hey, things are broken. Everybody knows the plan is because they're constantly doing it, or they were part of making the plan, and you're on calls together. Any feedback is going directly to your engineers because they're on the call with you. So in this stage, everything's very easy. So when we move into the technology, one of the questions that I get asked, and kind of a unique part of this stage, is that you don't have anything built, or you're building something. So you get the opportunity to start from scratch. So one of the questions I get asked is, what technology should I use to build my product? And the question, or the answer always is, it depends. So kind of a cop-out, but really, you should pick the technology that you know how to use or you're most familiar with, or that is right for the job. So Ruby on Rails is a great language to work with, or a great framework to work with. Some people say it doesn't scale, but if you're hitting the point where it's not scaling for you, then you're doing really well, and you can worry about that later. So pick something that you're familiar with and you can be productive, not just what's new and shiny. Another thing with a technology that's really hard to grasp at this stage is that done is better than perfect. So don't try to make perfect stuff and have perfect code, and code quality will just have to go away for a while. And that's okay, because quality is not really defined yet, and you shouldn't be afraid to incur technical debt and deploy all the time. And whenever you finish things, just deploy it. So this is kind of a funny thing that I see Craig in the back of the room there. So I pulled this out of our chats from 2010. We sent 800 emails to a beta user overnight at Rigor, and that wasn't great, but in the end, it was fine. So the motto for this stage kind of is move fast, break things, and focus on learning and figuring out what your product does. So as we get some customers and we're hitting this growth and everything's peachy, we're going to move in the product market fit stage. The people in this stage, your team's obviously going to be bigger. You'll have more engineers, and they're not just going to be prototypers anymore. So you'll start to bring in some specialists, maybe a UI designer, maybe just people that are very knowledgeable in certain areas. They're not just jack of all trades anymore. The CEO is still going to drive the product, yet that person's going to get a lot of feedback from other people on your front lines, like sales and customer success. And speaking of customer success, you're probably going to want one at this stage. So somebody who's willing to put on the fire suit and jump right in the fire. Somebody who's kind of there to triage issues and own the customer experience. So communication in this stage starts to break down a little bit. This is a common question. What is engineering actually doing? And the reason this question is being asked is because we all used to sit in the room together before. We knew what everyone was doing because, like I said, we all planned it together. At this point now, meetings aren't including everyone, and product direction is not clearly articulated to everybody because they just didn't hear it. So they're kind of busy, doing calls, doing demos, and all that. So this is where your engineering team also starts to operate with a little bit more structure. So before, when we were just deploying whenever we wanted, whenever things got done, now we're doing sprints, and we're on either a 2-week cycle or 1-week cycle, or we're doing something like Kanban, and everything is just going to go a little bit slower because of this new overhead, and that's okay. So one of the issues is if we carry over anything from the previous phase of communication, your engineers are going to get a lot of direct interaction. So people, your first sales rep is always used to going to Joe in engineering, and they're always going to say, hey, I have a problem with this thing. Can you help me fix it? Or, hey, somebody wants this new feature. Can we implement it so that we can close this deal? And this is going to start to get a little bit difficult and fragmented for your engineers because they're trying to juggle all these project requests with doing their day-to-day. There's fires here and there, so things are going to get a little hectic. The technology in this phase is going to start to be more mature, or you should at least try to get there. So something that's come out in probably the last 8 years or so is this DevOps methodology. It kind of means different things to different people, so depending on who you ask. But there's a bunch of phases here that help you develop this engineering process that's repeatable. The idea is that things are you're moving in a way that makes sense for everyone, that's empathetic, and that ensures quality down the line. So you're doing things like code review and testing. You're making automation things happen so that you're not constantly doing everything manually, and then you're starting to really look at product quality. So you're doing things like thinking about customer experience before you even start building the product. So maybe you're doing you're doing mobile first, or you're thinking about responsive views and all these things that maybe you didn't really think about before because you just wanted to move fast. In this point as well, outages are going to happen, and you're going to have a lot of customers that at this point that may not be happy about that. So when you get outages, you should tell people that an outage happened. So sending emails or this communication that kind of admits that something went wrong, this is the stage to start doing that. Doing deliberate releases is also very important. So as your company is obviously growing up and to the right, your salespeople are always going to be doing demos. You have on-sites, implementations, things like that. So you don't want to just deploy code whenever you want, because if you break your product and somebody's on a demo or on-site, even worse, is that's going to be really bad. So you don't want to leave your people out to dry. So either schedule your deploys or at least check the calendar to see what's coming up, so people know what's up. And the motto in this stage is move fast, develop your process, and try not to break anything. So now that we've acquired a bunch of customers and things are going great, now we're going to scale. So this is the stage where everything starts to get really awesome. So we're going to focus on things, and that's going to be very different than what we had before. So before, a lot of people, we had people that did a lot of things, and that was cool, and they just helped out where they could. Now is the time we want slow and steady engineers. We want people that are senior, people that know when to go fast and go slow. Kind of like Tony said before, like these are things that is kind of intuitive because they have a lot of experience. They know when to ask questions. They don't jive right into things, and they're going to help you ensure product quality and scalability down the line. One very important thing is technical leads are not necessarily your people managers. So if you had an engineer you started with, maybe they're not going to be the right person to scale and manage your team later on. Somebody who's doing coding most of the time and managing people some of the time is not going to do either one of them very well. So pick the right managers, get real engineering managers that know how to manage the process, and that's going to set you up for success down the line. Your CEO is probably actually now building, helping scale the business and doing CEO type things. So you're going to want a product team to help define the direction of your product. It helps you maintain focus and kind of shield everyone from all the deluge of stuff that comes through. So this is what the communication now looks like between product engineering and all the other stakeholders. The other stakeholders being sales, customer success, leadership, your customers. Before, your communication was one layer, so you were talking directly to each other, and now engineering communication now is 2 layers. So engineers are giving product updates to product, and then product is taking that information and distilling it to the rest of the team or customers. So these are things like timeline updates, milestone updates, and product is going to go take that and tell that to the rest of your team and educate them on what's coming out. And they're also going to help prioritize the requests and backlog of things that are coming in. So before, like I said, one layer comes to two, and that's when everything's like a game of telephone. Escalated support issues also now kind of shift. Instead of going directly to maybe the engineer that implemented the feature, that support issue should now go to the entire team. Because if it would be really bad to be the engineer that implemented the most popular feature, because you're going to be fielding all the support requests. So instead, spread that out over your whole team. Do something like a support schedule rotation, so that you can spread out that load. Also, in this stage, knowing how to communicate your engineering velocity and process to the rest of the company is going to be very hard, because before, people just saw features coming out and they're like, that's great, engineers are awesome, everyone's doing their job. Now you got to figure out what the engineering KPIs are that are going to measure the success of your team, and that's really hard. And that changes throughout every company, and I don't think there's one KPI that would actually be good for every single company. And these KPIs should help show the health of not only your engineering team, but also your technology and the product. So things like uptime are great, unless people don't care about that, but most of the time they do. And also in this stage, customer feedback is now not just directly put into the product. So if somebody says build X, you don't just go build X anymore. Now you go and ask 10 other customers, hey, would you like X, and what things would you like along with it? So that when time comes to build that thing, maybe you're building X, Y, Z, and that's better for everyone. So you're not spending all your time on just one customer. And now your product releases also include things like webinars and knowledge-based articles and how-tos and best practices and interviews with industry leaders on how to use this thing. So everything just takes a lot longer to get out. And that's why you should use a tool like Product Plan or some other product management tool that will help get everybody on the same page with releases. Your technology in this stage, like I've been saying, product quality is extremely important now. So these are things like look and feel, performance, the service of your customer success team. Like all of these things contribute to product quality. So you want to monitor the things that drive your business. So this is actually the status page for Rigor, status.rigor.com. So this shows you all of the some of the core systems and if they're healthy or not. And this is something like if you depend on email sending, you should be monitoring email sending, and you should be telling your customers how your email your email servers is behaving. So be transparent with the with the public status page. It's cool to tell people if something goes wrong, but also it's cool to tell them that everything's green because that's more fun. And when something does go wrong, if something goes red here, and you're writing postmortems, make sure you're doing it with action items. So people don't really care anymore that something went wrong because they think it happens to everyone, but they do care how you're going to fix it and not have it happen again next time. Also at this stage, technical debt and scaling issues are really going to hinder your productivity. So if you don't resolve them, you're basically piling snow on top of more snow, and eventually you'll have an avalanche. In this stage, practice fire prevention, not just firefighting. So let's try not to let these things slip through and worsen our product quality and trust. And we should do preemptive improvements to our infrastructure. So we should be looking at optimizing our costs for our infrastructure spend. So we're not just turning on new servers in Amazon, because adding more servers helps us scale out the load. And then look to improve uptime, because if your product doesn't work, then people can't use it, and then they get mad. So the motto in this phase is ensure quality, trust your process, and be transparent. So at Rigor, we developed these core values, and one of them was improve every day. So the goal of this talk is to help you improve today, right now. And here are some things which I think you could take home that may help you out. So the first one is all software has bugs, and this is something that Craig always used to tell me just to keep me grounded in the world. So it's very easy as an engineer to look around and see everything be on fire, and you're like, man, everything is broken, and we need to fix all these things. But really, all software has bugs, and it's okay to not have perfect software. So there's a balance between sloppy and perfect, and something that you should remember. Find that balance, and if you try to make perfect software, you're never going to release it. The next one is estimates are just estimates. So this little cartoon here says, for 5 days I've been doing nothing else but trying to deploy this effing application to our production environment. So sometimes things take longer than expected. If you go and ask an engineer in a casual conversation how long something will take, don't just take that number and give it to a customer. So if somebody says it'll take a week and you go and tell a customer it takes a week, now that engineer is never going to tell you an estimate again. So so let's keep that trust going. So on the flip side, as an engineer, if you get asked for an estimate, it's okay to ask for time to think about it. You can explain what you need to know in order to estimate, what you don't know, and how long you think it'll take to figure it out, and that's okay. The next one is be smart. So this SMART stands for specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time-bound. And write goals in this manner. So if you create a ticket that says create email sending service, that's never going to get done, and you won't know the progress of that. So instead, if you make 2 goals to start that said, that have specific items that are measurable with an assigned person and a due date, now everybody knows how far this thing is progressing. So maybe that's a better way to do it. Technical debt can easily become unmanageable the longer you wait. So here's kind of a funny, very smart person on Twitter talking about how technical debt explodes. Knowing your team is also very important. So this doesn't just apply to product and engineering teams. This kind of applies to everyone. But people have different working styles and ways that they effectively process information. So if you know that your engineers are all very asynchronous and they want to get information via email, don't go and ask them a question while they're in the middle of doing work, because you're going to disrupt productivity. You're not going to get the answer you want, and overall, it's just not going to get. It's kind of a waste of time for both of you. So if your people like meetings, make a meeting. If they like emails, write an email. People have different working styles, and you should know what they are. To kind of quote or reference Paul Graham's maker schedule versus manager schedule. I encourage you guys to look that up. Basically, to summarize it says managers operate on hourly schedules and makers operate on blocks of time. So if you schedule 2 meetings during a day, you've effectively cut a 8-hour block of time into small chunks, and it's really hard to get things done in a less than a 2-hour chunk of time for an engineer. So, it's really hard to keep progressing with your thoughts if you're always being interrupted. Another good Twitter quote is, don't make things harder for yourself. So if you deploy the day before Christmas and you have to debug stuff out of your parents' house, which I've done before, it's not that fun, and your engineers are going to suffer, client success is going to suffer, your sales reps are going to suffer because they lost prospects, and then the business is going to suffer because everybody hates their life. So this is my son. He hasn't learned how to code yet. He's still trying to get out of a bag. So you can find us on Twitter at Atlanta Ventures. Stories.atlantaventures.com is a great place to find some entrepreneur stories. You can find me on Twitter at HCLIU, and then Hubert Liu at atlantaventures.com is where to find me.
Let's give it up for Hubert.
Questions?
All right, any questions? Go. A few over here. AT's gonna. Mike?
I was just wondering, for each of the phases that you defined, how you decide how many engineers you need. And part 2 of the question is, have you ever solved a technical problem by throwing more engineers at it?
It's funny. So I think it depends. Kind of like it depends, right? You'll never know how many engineers you need for each stage, and that was actually one of the things I wrote. I don't know if you saw that on this slide. We should just hire 10 engineers to knock this out. So there's a thing called the mythical man month, which basically means you can't. There are some things you just can't do by throwing more things at it. So that's kind of the non-answer. Is it depends. But do whatever's right for you. If you feel like you can use engineers, or engineers are hire hard, so opportunistic hires are really great. So if an engineer does come on the market and they're really good, they probably won't stay on the market very long. So if you can find them, hire them. You have a microphone?
Hi. In your experience, does it make sense to get an engineer that you've started with the whole time that really knows the product in and out and transition them to a CTO role, or get someone from the outside?
Again, the answer is it depends. It depends on what that person wants to do. This is kind of what I went through when I, as this first engineer, there are some times when you want to stay in the weeds and you want to keep being an individual contributor and do your work and do cool technology scaling things, and that's great. If that person wants to be more strategic and go into a leadership role, then that's okay too. I don't think that there's one track for senior people that have been with your company for a long time. You don't want to just put them in a management position because of just because they've been there for a long time. So you really need to talk to them and figure out what they want to do. I think Tony said that earlier with sales. It's pretty much the same thing.
Hey, in the 3 different stages, in the first 2, you had the CEO leading product.
Right.
When it moves to scale, that now shifts to a dedicated product team. How do you get the CEO to be able to let go of those decisions?
That's a good question. And I think Craig's in the room, so I don't want to. No, I think it's and these, what I was recommending is kind of a loosely defined thing. It's not the same for everybody. But I think that the CEO eventually will have so many things to do that you have to kind of put them in a room and tell them to, which is what we did with Craig, get things done and stop chasing shiny things and let somebody do it. So trust your team is pretty important. If they're accountable for what happens coming out of that thing, you should give them the authority to make decisions on those things. So, Rob, how's it going?
Hey, Hubert. What advice would you give to leaders who want to create professional development for their team, for their engineers, when it's specifically hard if you don't understand the craft, right? So, and maybe direct it more specifically to you, what have people done for you that created the most personal growth that then kept you sort of happy and engaged? Because basically we know that everybody wants to be growing. How do you help people grow if you don't understand their craft?
Yeah, good question. So one of the things is making sure they're attending conferences of their choice. Don't just send them to an industry-specific conference. Fortunately for me, the conference of our industry was called Velocity, and it had a lot to do with infrastructure and operations, and that's what I wanted to do anyways. So that worked out really well for me. But if your UI or UX engineer doesn't want to really go to that and doesn't get value out of it, send them somewhere else. And that really comes from them to figure out what conferences are best in their industry. The other thing I think is it's great to help them find a mentor. And it's when Rob, you were one of my mentors and helped me out through this journey. So I think finding a mentor that's willing to work with you and kind of give you advice, even if it doesn't exactly match your situation, I think connecting your engineers with mentorship and leadership from outside companies of different stages. We did one where we talked to a bunch of engineers from a Fortune company that was not anywhere related to what we do, but listening to their engineering process and understanding that other teams are going through the same things as we were was super helpful.
If you're trying to do something that's probably never been done before for a customer that's didn't expect to be served, what are ways and you want good product market fit, what are some ways to work with engineers in the customer discovery process in ways that are constructive, and what are some of the don't do's where when you're small and you've got this unusual vision?
Yeah, so one of the most important things I think is make sure your engineers are in front of your customers. It's very easy to build things in a vacuum and know that you think you know better than somebody else that's going to use your product as an engineer, because the customer really does come first, and if you don't serve what they want to do, like if you don't solve their problem, then the product that you're creating isn't going to be useful. And this kind of manifests itself in, hey, as an engineer, I created this interface and it's perfect. And then I look in full story and they're clicking the wrong place every single time. We should use that feedback to better the product, and that feedback comes from customers. So kind of knowing that customers are the ones that are using the product and they really do know, even if you think your design is perfect, you should go and seek that knowledge from the customers. Yeah, so I went on site a lot of times with Craig. I remember the first time I went, he told me I had to tuck my shirt in and wear real clothes, and that was shocking to me. But you learn a lot about the customer. They're not faceless anymore. They're not just reporting bugs. They're actually, you're getting really good value out of helping them. And then you have a face, and you're like, there's a face to them, and every time they ask you a question, you're like, oh man, that's John over there, and I really want to fix this problem because he actually was a nice guy. But when he wrote in that support ticket, he kind of sounded like a jerk. So it kind of that helps out. And then later down the line, we had this, one of our KPIs was we wanted to get all the engineers on site or having a customer communication in the quarter. So, making sure they're on a customer success call, making sure they're on a sales call, making sure they're on site implementations. Like all of these things really help engineers because Typically a lot of engineers are very introverted, so you want to get them out in front of the customer and being able to understand their pain, and it helps create empathy.
So you talked a lot about the kind of the dynamics between making sure you pay down code debt and making sure it's perfect versus getting things out, and then also the communication aspect to make sure that others outside of the engineering organization know what's going on. I know that we always had a lot of discussions all the time about how fast to move versus how perfect or how to clean things up. And I know and I hear this when I talk to other people who are not necessarily technical. Could you share a little bit about the engineering side, the viewpoint, and kind of where that's coming from? Obviously, everybody out in the rest of the organization wants all the features today, and why can't we just have that?
Right.
And so, how did you manage that?
Yeah, so one of the things I started to try to think about was, how can I explain this situation in terms that all of the business can understand? So if the situation is our infrastructure, if it goes down, will affect 99% of our customers, and we're going to lose a lot of revenue. That's something that everybody can understand. But if you say, our CPU is spiking at 99%, and we need to add more RAM, people don't understand that. So put it in business terms. Something that Edwin, one of our rigor mentors, always talked about was create a metric that helps describe your business. So with the with ICE, they talked about a request per second. So if that number goes up or down, you're making improvements or you're slowing down. So something that's engineering related, but is in terms of a business metric is a really good way to do that.
Let's give it up for Hubert Liu. Thank you, Hubert. All right, our final speaker before today's interview, Karen Houghton, is the culture keeper and community builder of the Atlanta Tech Village. Over the past 5 years, Karen has shaped the Atlanta Tech Village into America's 4th largest tech hub. Within those 5 years, she supported companies like Rigor, IO Education, Saleslofts, Terminus, Calendly, and hundreds more to achieve greater success by connecting them to community, talent, and capital. When Karen has a break from the hustle and bustle of the ATV, she's definitely drinking the freshest batch of hand-poured coffee in the building. Let's give it up for Karen Houghton.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. My name is Karen Houghton, and I have one of the best jobs in the entire world. I'm so excited to be chatting about culture with you guys today because not only am I passionate about it, I've dedicated more than 10,000 hours into building and creating community and culture here at Atlanta Tech Village. So if it's your first time here, raise your hand. All right, awesome, welcome. We're so glad to have you guys. We are currently sitting in America's 4th largest tech hub. We have over 300 startups and over 1,000 people. And those startups have raised $500 million and created over 3,600 jobs in less than 5 years. Now, what's crazy is that these stats are not even what we value most. What we value most is that we have created a kind, collaborative community of badass entrepreneurs who want to change the world. Our mission here at Atlanta Tech Village is to support and inspire those entrepreneurs by providing faster connections between talent, ideas, and capital. We truly believe that we are the very best place to grow and build a startup. We have 2 overarching goals. The first is to help drive Atlanta into one of the top 5 tech cities in the US. And the second is to create 10,000 jobs in our first 10 years. Around the village, you hear the words community and culture a whole lot, and intentionally so. Far too often, culture is not made a priority for startups and larger companies. It's considered secondary or even kind of this fluffy thing. But there is so much research that says otherwise. Here's just a few stats for you. First off, 64% of employees feel that they don't have a strong work culture. And turnover at those companies with a poor work culture is 48%. Now compare that to companies with a really great culture, and that number drops to only 14%. And did you know that peers and camaraderie are the #1 reason employees go the extra mile? It's not about the money. And finally, companies with engaged employees outperform those without them by over 200%. You guys, culture is important, and it does impact your bottom line. Now, remember when I said that we scaled to over 1,000 people in less than 5 years? Well, we were able to do that while maintaining a Net Promoter Score of 76. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with NPS, it's essentially a metric used to look at your detractors and your promoters. The scale goes from -100 to 100. If you have a score of 50, you are considered excellent. If you have a score of over 70, you are considered world class. So yes, Atlanta Tech Village and Tesla, we're both kind of a big deal. Now, in addition to those NPS scores, we've also maintained a 100% occupancy rate. This means at any given time, we have 10 to 20 companies on our wait list. And as those startups graduate out and those founders achieve an exit or an acquisition, we're now starting to see them already come back around for their next company. So what's our secret sauce? How do we do this? Well, the good news is that it's actually not that secret at all. You see, from the very, very beginning, we intentionally built a culture that would attract the very best entrepreneurs. There's never been any secret to who we are or who we aspire to be. From day one, we had a clearly defined mission. We had clearly defined goals, and we had clearly defined core values. So, what are those core values? Be nice, dream big, work hard, play hard, and pay it forward. They almost seem stupid simple, but they've done an incredible job of curating our community for us. So what is culture? Well, culture is a set of shared beliefs, values, and practices. Think of it as the system that powers your company. You may have heard of this guy. He says smart things sometimes. And one of them is that the only sustainable competitive advantage that is completely in control of the leadership team is corporate culture. You guys know there are so many things in the startup world that we cannot control. But we can choose how we want to run our company and the people that we choose to spend time with day in and day out. You see, at Atlanta Tech Village, it has never been about the office space. It's about the entrepreneurs. The building is simply what brings us all together. So how do you create culture? Don't worry, I'm going to give you 3 steps. Ready? All right, number 1 is take the time to spell it out. I can't tell you how many times over the last 5 years someone has approached me and said, hey, Karen, I would love to hear about how you guys have really built such a special community and culture at the Village. Because they want to replicate it and they want to learn from it. And I'm always happy to help. But I always start by asking a few questions first. I say, great, I would love to hear about your mission. What are your goals? What are your core values and how have you communicated those to your team? 9 out of 10 times, you know what I get? Crickets. Because the majority of founders don't take the time to prioritize culture and create that foundation for their team. It may seem like common sense, but if you've not written it down and lived it out and communicated that to your team, I can guarantee you that they probably lack clarity and direction. If you don't take the time to spell it out, they probably don't know why they're there and what's expected of them. For the Atlanta Tech Village team, we were roughly 2 years in when I started to realize that those minimum requirements of that overarching umbrella of be nice, dream big, work hard, play hard, and pay it forward, they were not quite enough. We had a very young team, and we needed something that provided a little more guidance and kind of expectations for day-to-day interactions. So, because America, we went the democratic approach. And over a few different meetings, we had the team give us adjectives that described not only how we were currently working, but what we aspired to be. And then, we put those into a few buckets, and we did some wordsmithing. And at the end, we achieved buy-in from every single person on our team. And here's what we came up with. Assume the best, treat each other like family, and have a willingness to sweep the floors. By assuming the best, all of a sudden, we were able to solve conflict that we were really struggling with before. And we were already treating each other like family. We attend weddings, we attend funerals, and we attend baby showers. We truly care for our people inside and outside of this building. Having a willingness to sweep the floors meant that no job was too small. No one on the Village team will ever say, that's not my job, I'm not going to do it. We all pitch in to help achieve the greater goals. You see, while staying true to those core values we had, we were able to have a more defined purpose that we collectively created together. Bottom line is that we took the time to spell it out, not only for Atlanta Tech Village, but also for our team. Number 2, hire for culture fit. In the HubSpot culture deck, they say that culture is to recruiting as product is to marketing. Think about it like this. Great product attracts customers, while great culture attracts strong people. Think of the values as the captain of your ship. They ensure that everybody is aligned and they're all rowing in the same direction. If you get misaligned, you're going to get off course, or at the very least, it's going to take you a lot longer to get where it is that you want to go. And now remember, it also doesn't matter what kind of oars you have, or what kind of boat you're in, or even what direction you decide to go. What matters is that you're rowing together. And your values can do that. Because when you're rowing together, you have an aligned, motivated culture, which is an incredibly powerful way to build a great company. It can look a little something like this. But before you start rowing together, you also have to make sure that you have the right people on the ship. And it may not look like that guy. You can do this through something called intentional hiring. Intentional hiring means you're very strategically looking for the right culture fit for your team. How I define culture fit is by looking at skill and/or capability, your experience, and if those people are already living out what you decided your core values were. I believe that all 3 of those things should be weighted equally. Now, sometimes people hear the word culture fit and they think, well, you're just trying to hire somebody who looks like you and thinks like you. That can't be further from the truth, you guys. Culture fit simply means that you have a foundation where you're getting alignment and you all know that you're going to be building a company in the same direction with the right value proposition. Once you find that culture fit, I encourage you to choose diversity. Intentionally look for people who do not look like you, who have a different perspective and a different background. Because I strongly believe that diverse teams are better teams. At Atlanta Tech Village, our culture fit is actually the result of a carefully constructed application process that attracts the right kind of founders. Unlike traditional co-working facilities, we actually have a multi-step application process with intentional friction points. We do this because we want to make sure that we're curating the right kind of founder for our community. So here's a little what that looks like. First, you have to sign up for a member tour. and they're only offered on certain times at certain days. And guess what? You have to go online and reserve your spot. It's amazing how many tech startups that actually filters out already. Once they come on the tour, we get to know them, and we hear about what they're working on, and we share about our mission and our values and our community. But we also observe you. And we think, are they engaging? Are they excited to be here? Are they talking with us? If you're the dude that comes in late and sits in the back and doesn't talk to anyone and you're on your phone the whole time, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that we're going to give you a hard pass. At the end of that hour-long tour, we verbally give you the instructions for follow-up. That's right, we don't even follow up with them. We wait. Are they really self-starting? Do they have initiative to actually follow up with us? And when they do, we get that application and we look at proprietary technology and a business plan and their LinkedIn and their social media and why do they want to be a part of the village. And all of this is very intentional because we want to make sure that they are the right kind of founder for our community. And we need to make sure that they are able to decide if we are the kind of right community for them. Because after all, life is too short to work with assholes. That's right, people. I don't care how cool the technology is or what name you drop, Dave Cummings. I get that a good bit. What matters is that you're a good fit for us. And you guys, we do have some people slip through the cracks. It happens. And somebody raised their hand back there. We'll talk after this. What happens with that, you guys, is we actually work really quickly to identify them. And yes, we fire them and remove them from the community. That's how much we value what we've created here and how much we want to preserve our culture. Because we're in it together, right? This building is open 24/7. We're experiencing the startup highs and the startup lows. We celebrate successes together, and we make sure that when there's failure, we do not attach shame. We truly believe, from our Net Promoter Scores and the wait list for office spaces, that this is the kind of community that entrepreneurs want to be a part of. You guys, it would be so easy to only be about selling office space. We are a for-profit, double bottom line business. Our business model is selling memberships, and we have to sell a lot of them. And because of this, we live in this tension of our profitability goals versus our desire to build a kind, collaborative community. But we choose to live within this space. And we choose to live within this tension because we know that if we were only focused on revenue, that our community would look very, very different. All right, so we've spelled out our values, and we've recruited the right people. But you can't stop, won't stop there. The third and final step is repeat, repeat. That's right, people. It's not enough to just pick some pretty words and put them on your website and call them your core values and maybe mention them as you interview different candidates for your team. You have to actually do stuff to create a living, breathing culture. And remember, there's no right or wrong culture, but whatever you decide it is, you have to be consistent. You have to develop a rhythm that ensures that your mission and your goals and your core values stay top of mind. My rule of thumb is that if you aren't tired of hearing yourself say it, then you probably have not said it enough. At Atlanta Tech Village, we strategically place our core values throughout our entire building. They're on our lanyards and our key cards. They're over our water fountains. They're in our parking decks and on our walls and TVs and in our Wi-Fi password. And we do this because we never want our members to forget who we are and what we are about. For the Atlanta Tech Village, with living out those core values every day, in every interaction with members, with guests, with vendors, and strategic partners. And because of that, we have chosen to hire relationship builders across the board. From our director of security to our facilities team and our events manager, every single one of them is values-driven and mission-minded. Because for us, it is not enough to just sell a membership. We truly want to know what is life like for our entrepreneurs and how can we better support them. For the Atlanta Tech Village team, we've developed our own rhythm of culture. That means every Monday we have a team meeting. And then afterwards we go out to lunch. We simply break bread together. We have quarterly outings. Those quarterly outings, yes, we do strategic planning and we have themes. But we also do fun social activities together. And we have village-versaries. This is what we call our work anniversaries. And we acknowledge them, and we give them a special gift. And David Lightburn and myself handwrite a thank you note to that team member, thanking them specifically for what they contributed to our team that year. And we have something we call cheat sheets. And they have our brand promise and our mission and our values. And we've given them to every single member of our team to put on their desk. And we have them hanging in our office on the wall. Because the other thing I realized is that no matter how much we say it, sometimes people on our team can't always articulate them. And my worry is that that could lead to a weak culture. So here's my challenge for you. Without any warning, you should just walk up to somebody on your team and say, hey, do you know what our values are, our mission, or our goals? You may get a response that looks a little something like this. You see, I do this to the Village team. On those Monday meetings I mentioned, I seriously just call on people and put them on the spot and say, hey, tell me the goals and mission, give me your 30-second pitch on the Village. And they hate it. And it's so uncomfortable. And when I first started doing it, it was met with silence and fumbling words. But I kept asking. And eventually they realized I was not going to stop. And they started to learn them. And today, our team can articulate these often better than myself. And I'm so proud of this because not only is it in their heart, but it means it's always top of mind. You see, the Village culture is a natural derivative of our core values, and it's real, and it's authentic. And our startups know that we are their biggest fans. You guys, culture is a living, breathing thing. It should be something that you feel when you walk into a room, and it should be something that you feel when you talk to somebody on that team. Our startups love our culture. We have something that people want to be a part of. And that connection as a group and as a startup family is a very powerful thing. You guys, there are so many things that we cannot control in the startup world. But again, you can control how you run your business and the people that you choose to spend time with day in and day out. And so I encourage you to take the time to choose wisely. Clarify what you value. Get the right people on the boat, and then confidently and consistently steer them in the right direction. And remember that at Atlanta Tech Village, we have never been about the office space. We are about the entrepreneurs and the collaborative community they create and the successes that our culture can inspire. The building is simply what brings us all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Fantastic. Wow, that was good. Any questions? Yes, Hubert.
Hey, Karen.
What's up, Hubert?
Great job.
Thanks.
I have a question about making sure that we are hiring with diversity while maintaining. So we want people to be culture fits, but how can we ensure that we're hiring culture adds as well?
I think it's just being intentional and choosing that. I think there's a lot of ways that people can take the easy way out and just saying, well, there are no diverse candidates. Okay, well, where are you getting your candidates? Have you intentionally chosen to be in different schools and in different places? And who are you networking with and who are you connecting with? I think if you intentionally say, hey, we want to make sure that we have more diversity to make us a stronger team, then you're going to find people who have different perspectives. And a big part of it, at least for the Village, so we actually launched an initiative earlier this year. It was called It Takes a Village, and it was a diversity campaign. Ideally, yes, you shouldn't have to put a campaign on it, but right now, in this world today, we do. And for us, it was a big learning curve because we were like, of course we want diversity. Of course this is something, everyone is welcome. But as we kind of started to delve a little deeper, we were like, man, well, how are we assuming that? How are people just supposed to know that? And so by creating this campaign, we were very intentional about putting out there and recruiting diverse founders and more female founders and giving scholarships and saying, this is a place where we want you. Not only are you welcome, we want to bring you into this fold because you'll make us better. And I think if you can develop that message, it goes a really long way, and it just accelerates as it goes.
Hey, Karen.
Hey, Anand.
Great presentation. Thanks for sharing those tidbits and insights. In terms of building a strong community, can you share a little bit about how it, and maybe this is lessons for startups as well that are growing, how that's manifested itself in terms of retention and advocacy?
Yeah, well, one of those slides was the turnover rates, right? That was crazy when I saw that.
I missed that slide, sorry.
Sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot in that way, sorry. But yeah, so I mean, some of those stats say it's like if you don't have a strong work culture, that turnover rate can be 48%. But if you really have a strong work culture, it decreases all the way down to 14%. And right, it's also just common sense, right? So if you just think, hey, what kind of company do I want to work for? Especially if you guys are attracting, right? Startups often do younger talent, right? They're a little more affordable, they're a little hungrier. How do you create a place where people want to be? And that's not that hard, right? It's a culture kind of centric place. That's what millennials want. And to think about it, it's what you want. Don't you want to be somewhere someone values you, where you have camaraderie, where you're able to connect and build community with your team and with your customers? That's the founder's job. If you guys simply take the time to do that and create that rhythm and culture to make sure it's in place, recruitment and retention becomes a whole lot easier. We have a job board here at the Village, and we do a lot of different kind of things to recruit talent on behalf of our startups. But I think one of the best ways to do that is they're attracted to our culture. And so you're getting people who will come work for a startup for less money than they would if they worked for a larger corporate company. But you have to make sure what is your differentiator. And a lot of that comes down to culture for startups.
Karen, I always think that company culture really shows when people leave your organization, when you have to, let people go, because that sends a signal as to how, people are really treated. Do you have any, insights how you guys do that when someone doesn't work out? What the, exit strategy is for the person?
I do. I call it a little thing called reframing. And so we've done that kind of with some of the Village team members. If someone isn't a good fit, ideally you've given them a few warnings and you're meeting with them and you're trying to do everything you can to help improve that situation. But if they're not teachable, it's not trainable, it's not a good fit. I've often given them a timeline and just said, hey, you know what? We've gone through this. Here's this pattern. I just don't think this is the right fit for you. Let's go ahead and put a 30 days on this. And let's go ahead and start networking and see where else we can plug you in and if I can make any introductions on your behalf. Obviously, that's somebody who has good skills, but just may not be for us. As far as the Atlanta Tech Village community, we've had some hard ones. But I think the biggest important thing is that we don't want them to feel uncared for, even in a really difficult situation. And so I think that there are ways to do it where even if you want to be reactive and you have a lot of really strong things you want to say, that doesn't mean you need to say them. I think anybody who's left here, perhaps unwillingly, I've still been able to say, hey, you know what, we wish you the best. Much luck, you know, and I think you can do it in a kind way, but still be very firm to preserve that culture because it sends a strong message to everyone around you.
Karen, in terms of when you're evaluating companies and the cultural fit and diversity, do you also look at age as part of that? Because every picture, everything's about millennials, I get it, but is that taken
Oh my
into
gosh, we
consideration?
love entrepreneurs who are a little bit older, right? Sometimes it comes from they're trying something new, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I've been in that corporate world for how long and I have to do my own thing. I've had this idea that I've been wanting for so long. It's time to take the plunge. All the way to we have a lot of repeat founders who, hey, you know what? They're in their 60s and they're on their 4th or 5th company or 6th company. And we greatly desire that. We don't want to be just a young company. So that's where that diversity, when we can get those experienced entrepreneurs, experienced businessmen and businesswomen, that provides so much because now our younger people have somebody to look up to and to show success. And a lot of times, I see Mike Burke in the crowd. So Mike Burke, Clockwise MD, that's actually there on our graduate wall. So Mike recently had an acquisition. And he's already come back. Started out as a reserve desk. You didn't know I was going to put you on the spot. Started out as a reserve desk in co-working and scaled his company in the village and then eventually had it moved out and had an acquisition after his graduation. And we encourage them to come back. Mike is now a mentor here at the village. And it's such an honor for me to be able to get to say, hey, especially for young founders who are in health IT, you have to go talk to Mike. He's done this before. He knows people. This is a great resource for you.
Hi, Karen. Not really a question, but really a compliment, because just before your presentation, I was sharing with Felipe, which is a new member here, about how you guys live up to the values you guys put everywhere, and you make sure that you guys are living up to it. So just thank you for creating this community and making sure that everybody is being nice, dreaming big, play hard, work hard, and paying forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't even pay her to say that. Thank you. I know we're meeting sometime too, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Karen.
All right, thank you guys.
And you'll be around for the networking? Yes, wonderful. All right, without further ado, we have Craig Hyde, CEO of Rigor, and David Cummings, founder of Pardot, the Atlanta Tech Village, and chief partner at Atlanta Ventures. And today we're going to be having a great discussion on going from zero to millions of dollars in ARR and building a great business. So DC and Craig, take it away. Thank you.
Awesome. We're really excited to be here today. One of my favorite things to do is to talk with entrepreneurs and hear their story, hear the why, hear the how, hear the ups, hear the downs. And so Craig and I actually met a number of years ago through one of our top sales reps at Pardot. He came into my office one day and he's like, hey, I got this fraternity brother from Georgia Tech who really wants to start a company, and would you mind listening to our pitch? And so Jordan brought Craig in and they gave me this pitch, and I don't even remember what the original pitch was. I'm sure.
Oh, yes. So the original pitch that we came to you with was a gift card marketplace. We were going to sell all types of gift cards online. And the idea that we came up with was because I was working down at Incom, which they make all the gift cards that you see. If you go to a Kroger and you see those big racks of gift cards, and it's all made by essentially one company is the major clearinghouse for that. And they had no e-commerce website. And so our big plan was to go to them, build out an e-commerce site, and have giftcards.com or something like that. And within 5 minutes, David's like, oh, I don't really know anything about e-commerce. That's not really my thing. And we got to talking about kind of the industry that I was in at the time and sort of morphed the conversation to what's going on in that space. And I had a whole bunch of ideas in the space, but it was not the original pitch that we came to. So we almost did a quick 180 within 5 minutes on the business plan to go right into the domain that I had been working in for a long time. So that's kind of a cool start.
So before we jump into rigor and hear some more about that story, tell us about your first real entrepreneurial journey with the MMA gym.
Oh man, so I've always had a bunch of, like a lot of entrepreneurs, had the itch and started 50 different companies when I was a teenager, and all these like side projects and side hustles. But the first real thing that I started was shortly after school. A friend of mine, my best friend from high school, and I got together and got the bright idea to start up an MMA gym whenever UFC was really starting to take off in mainstream. And we got connected with some of the Gracie family and the individuals who were straight out of Brazil and brought a lot of the training here to the US, and were able to kind of cobble together a motley crew and get this gym opened up in Holly Springs, Georgia. And my input was I was going to work for my software company at the time and write the checks until we got up and running. And the check part happened, but the up and running never really did. But it actually kind of it got going, but it was never leave my job and go full time into this MMA. And it's actually still running up in Woodstock. It's a Gracie Baja gym, but we're not a part of it. And it was a heck of an experience, though.
So good. So what were one or two takeaways from doing the side hustle with the MMA gym? And big picture, why didn't it work out?
Well, there's a big picture why it didn't work out. I mean, there was a few things, probably because it was not, it was doomed to be from the get-go. But a couple of things that I learned, and John and I were talking about this, wherever John Birdsong is, earlier when he was doing the interview with me, and the biggest thing was kind of the market. Do something that you know and do something that you really care about. I wasn't super passionate about the beating people up world, but it just seemed like such a great idea, and I was like, oh, well, this, it's up and to the right. This is a massive market that's taking off, and so it's got to happen. It's got to work, and so. But once I got into it, I didn't love it, and it wasn't my, the thing that I wanted to do every single day. It was more of a chore over time. And then the other piece of the market side is that, joking about it, but beating people up, the market for people who want to beat each other up and pay for a high-priced gym, that's not a great one because they don't necessarily have there's not the money there to fund it, and it's just not a healthy market the way the software space is that we are in now. So those are the two big things that I learned, and kind of why didn't it work? I mean, there's a handful of things, but the people that I was in the business with, I don't think we were aligned on a values perspective or the long-term vision, and we thought that the up and the right charts that we made in the spreadsheet whenever we were doing a business plan, that those were real before they were. So, we didn't give it time, and we didn't give it the runway that it needed to take off if it were going to take off in the long run. So those are a few of the points.
So you were progressing through your career. You had a couple different jobs. What made you decide to take the leap and become a full-time SaaS entrepreneur?
Sure. So, we shut the business down, or MMA, and kind of turned the keys over, so they were just going to run their martial arts studio. And we did that about 2008, and I went to work for a large company called CompuWare, and the idea is, to pay back my mom and my friends and my cousins who I borrowed all their money from to get the gym up and running, and then, really focus on the career that I had carved out for myself. But really quickly, not really quickly, after a few years, I kind of made the progress that I wanted to make in that company, and I looked at sort of up and down the org chart and saw that my boss had been there for a decade, his boss has been there for 2 decades, the level above had been there for 35 years, and was at a great point financially, but kind of looking up and down the stack of the people in the organization and where it had been around since the 70s, I was just kind of like, what now? I mean, do I put the next 30 years in, rinse and repeat, and make a good living and just have the kind of the easy road, or do I go out and start something, or go out and look for a new challenge? And I was toying with going back to school and kind of looking to find out what's that thing that I could go try and figure out how to master. And the timing and all sorts of stuff just worked out to where I could jump into a new business and start something from scratch. So I had always had this in the back of my mind of getting out there and starting another company once I kind of cleaned the slate from the first business. And I had kept my living situation really lean and didn't go out and buy the new fancy cars when I got the raises or go buy a new house. I still had roommates in a townhouse with a paid-off car and almost no bills. So it was always in the back of my mind, and then the timing and when we got connected and everything just sort of lined up, but it was an inevitable thing that was going to happen sooner or later anyways.
So you took the big plunge, you started Rigor. What did Rigor do initially? Like day one, what was the idea for the product?
So the day one idea for the product was to have, so there's a space called application performance management. In the startup world, a lot of people know New Relic. It's kind of the big name in the market. But this space has been around for decades, since computers existed, right? It's how to make them faster and tune the apps that are running on them. And I had worked for the biggest company in the space at the time. It's now called Dynatrace. But we basically implemented a bunch of solutions in people's data centers, physical data centers. Like I would crawl around in the data center room down at Southern Company and connect wires and plug things into switches. And we would listen to network traffic and install things on servers to put a big dashboard in an operations center that says green light good, red light bad, go fix things. And we were at AutoTrader where they had bought millions of dollars worth of our software, and we had implemented it, and all lights were green, and the site autotrader.com went down. And while we were there doing the implementation, and so they drug us into a room, they said, what's going on? And we're like, everything, all the lights are green, nothing's broken here. And then they said, yeah, that's fine, but the phones are ringing off the hook and nobody could use the website. So we found out that it was a third party loaded from a CDN, and it was something, this cloud. It basically means it's software loading from somewhere else, and it's not in the physical data center where we were located. So the eureka moment was, hey, there needs to be this market. There's going to be a new market that's going to be created to not only keep track of, in the same way that we kept track of the applications in data centers, but as all the technology moves out of those data centers, there's going to be a need for something to keep track of it. And so it was cloud-based performance management software. We were initially focused on going after e-commerce sites because we knew that had the monetary teeth, right? So nobody likes waiting for pages to load, but when you're on a bestbuy.com and it's slow, you leave and you don't buy things. So there's a lot of revenue tied to it. And so our vision was to take that and put it out there for kind of the SMB world, all the mom and pop e-commerce shops that were out there on the internet. So it would have been a credit card sign up, $50 a month, for anybody who wants to start a business to keep track of their site.
So who was the first customer, and why did they buy the software?
So that's a great question. It came at about eight months into the business, and I love to tell this story because here I am, I quit my job in corporate America, making tons of money, and now I'm making no money. I'm publishing software to nobody, and Hubert and I are just working in the corner trying to figure out how to make software. And 8 months later, we get our first customer, and it's controlfreak.com, a local brand here in Atlanta, and they paid us $50 a month. And so we were like sounding the bell, running around, high-fiving each other. Like, we got customers, we're in business. And then I went home that night, and I'm like, damn it. I've been working for 8 months, 2 people, full-time, and we have $50 of total revenue.
What am I doing here? But the initial use case, it was they were trialing our software and didn't really see the value in it, or they didn't really understand it. And I mean, granted, it was new and it was kind of cobbled together, but their site went down, and Rigor told them, and they had no idea, and it would have been down who knows how long. But we caught it and sent the email, and they went. And Ashish picked up the phone and called their e-commerce provider. It was like, hey, your site's down. They went, sure enough, it was. So once we got that win, he's like, I get it, cool, I'll pay for it now. But that was really useful too, because he called his e-commerce hosting provider. It was called Shop Visible. They used to be right down the street, and they had a couple hundred different e-commerce sites on their platform. And they've recently been acquired by a much larger retail software company. And so he sent a Rigor report to the provider, and they called us to say, hey, how did you figure this out? And then we ended up going into their office and rolling out across the 100+ different companies that we were working, or that they were working with. And then they'd take us into their big brands, and so we got our first big deals from that individual customer. So it started to flywheel pretty quick from there, but yeah, the first deal was a $50 deal because we found a problem, and it just proliferated from there.
That's awesome. So 8 months, 2 people working hard.
Full-time.
Full-time.
More than full-time.
More than full-time at significantly below market salaries or no salary.
Yeah, way below.
To get $50. But then that one customer, one e-commerce business in Atlanta, led to the e-commerce provider that they use, which led to dozens more customers. And like you said, the flywheel just started turning.
It was, it's slow and steady, but that flywheel starts to pick up. Just another added kind of story about that is, so Shop Visible, they started working with Tempur-Pedic.com, the mattress company, and they brought us in and they said, Tempur-Pedic was looking at actually my old company, and they said, oh, okay, this is $100,000, and Shop Visible said, we're working with this company Rigor right across the way. Look, take a look at that. And so we got Tempur-Pedic, which is a huge brand for us, and they were able to do case studies and things like that. And then we also went into Tempur-Pedic and we said, let us make your site faster. Like, let's do a project looking at our software and figuring out what we can do. And we were able to turn the dial for them, and we did a before and after kind of scientific-based test, or scientific method style test where we had controls, and we found out that by doing the things that we figured out, to like making the optimizations that our software picked up, it cut their load time by 1.5 seconds, which doesn't sound that much, but their order value went up a lot. And so they went up, I think it was 15% in their conversion, or their average order values, just by speeding up the site. So you figure if you go to Tempur-Pedic, it's pretty known brand, you're probably buying that beds, but people surfed more on the site and they'd add pillows and buy more items when the site was faster. And so we found that out. This site was doing $100 million a year online, and we're like, holy crap, we just made these people, $100 million, say order value went up 15%. We just made this company $15 million and per year. We're charging them $1,000 a month. Like this, we could be onto something, and we're able to take that story, got it printed out. It got their blessing to share that, and so that was another story that something that became $50 that went to the local startup in town that was hosting the site, that went to a major brand, that we got this mega win, and now we're able to take that all over the place and start replicating it. So it was definitely a flywheel scenario. It's cool.
That's awesome. So you're grinding it out, signing customers, finding different patterns and different items that introduce you to new customers. When did you realize that the business was actually going to work? When did you feel like it was going to be a sustainable, ongoing concern?
Day one, when I decided to go in on it.
Yeah, you just...
Like, always, like, this is going to work for sure. and over time you can see it more clearly, but you used the term once when you were talking about jumping into it, which is, you said, I was blissfully ignorant, and I just went and started the company, and it worked. And had you done the math, that's probably poor math, right? I should have just stuck with my regular job, but when you factor in the probability and the fail rates of companies, but
and how many customers you have to sign at $50 a month to
oh my gosh,
a business
yeah,
that can pay the bills?
Yeah, once I did that math, I'm like, okay, so I got one. Oh crap, we just need the rest of the earth to sign up, and I'll be able to pay my mortgage. But yeah, so I've never had a doubt that it would be successful, but you can see it much more clearly over time. And now it's like we're talking, hey, we want to be 20 million in revenue in 2020, and it's like I look at the company now, and we already have a $20 million business. We just haven't gotten there yet. So I can just see it so clearly. I don't know. Maybe I'm ignorant in that blissfully ignorant in that way.
So one of the challenges as an entrepreneur is starting the business out. You're the doer. You're actually writing code. You're selling on the front lines. And then once the business starts working, hopefully it does, the company grows, and now you hire some other people, and you become more of a manager. And then now it's at your stage where you have dozens and dozens of employees, and now you have to be a manager of managers of individual contributors. What are some of the lessons learned going from doer to manager to manager of managers?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was cool to see Hubert up here earlier talking about his journey from the engineering side and seeing a lot of those challenges. When you start to see the communication breakdowns, when you're not in everyone sitting around one table working on things, and it starts to become separate teams, and you have to do the communication to make sure everybody's in the loop. But you asked the question, what have I learned about making that transition, or kind of tips? But it's very different. Being good at making software, being good at selling software has nothing to do with being good at managing a team, has nothing to do with being good at recruiting great people or maintaining a culture. And it's a completely different skill set, mindset, the way you operate. And it was very hard for me to make that transition because I'm just kind of like a little bit scatterbrained, but I just like to do things. I'm not the best. I'm not the most organized. I'm not the best planner. And so I've had to work at it a lot. I mean, joined up with EO prior to Entrepreneurs Organization, and I went through their accelerator program. I have professional coach. I have a bunch of mentors, but it's something that just I've had to consistently work at over time. And but a big key takeaway is just recognizing that being the best at doing something doesn't make you the best manager. It doesn't make you the best leader. And you really have to work at the specialties and the becoming a leader and becoming a manager, from a mindset and also a skill set standpoint. It has to be intentional, I believe, at least.
So it's an ongoing challenge even to this day, it sounds like?
Oh, absolutely.
So from an entrepreneur perspective, typically entrepreneurs are good at one thing, whether it's building the product or fundraising or marketing or sales or whatever it might be. What's your superpower? Why have you been successful beyond?
Oh, where do I start? Beyond
just willing to grind it out and that willingness to will it to success. I think that is a superpower, but what beyond that grind ability that you have?
So I believe where I have been successful is I've got a technical background, and I just not only that hey, I went to school and studied engineering, because that doesn't really matter all that much, but I get technology, and I kind of can see how it all works, and I'm fascinated by it, and I like to learn about it and tinker with it. So I'm technical, but also I've been more like on the sales side as well. So kind of blending sales and the business and trying to marry those two has been where I've made my success throughout my career, is just understanding how technology works and having the chops to be able to go in there and figure it out and write some terrible code when I need to. And then also being able to translate that to the high-level business standpoint. And so that's kind of been, the combination of those two has been kind of what I've hung my hat on so far.
So a lot of SaaS companies start more in the low end of the market or the first couple customers, whoever they can find.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, as they garner more success, they move up market.
Yep.
So your first Rigor customer ever was $50 a month. And today you have several customers that pay 6 figures a year for the product.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the thoughts and lessons learned as you slowly moved up market over time?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because if you read up on like SaaStr, and the common knowledge out there is start small and increase your ACV over time, your average customer value, and continue to build out more enterprise and features and go up market, and that's how you get the real scale. We did that, but we didn't know that we were doing that, because the initial market that we were thinking of going after was just SMBs, because we thought, well, there are so many more of them. And as we built up our feature set and listened to the customers, we realized that, hey, we can go in there and compete and win these big deals. Like, we're better than these companies that have been signing $1 million contracts. And so it was more of an evolution, and it wasn't so much purposeful on our end. But I think it seems like the right strategy, or at least a commonly addressed strategy, is to start small and raise your ACV over time by going up market. And we're still not done, because we're building out new features every day, which expands the total market that we can go after, so we can get more of customers' wallets. And we've got a couple 7-figure contracts that are floating around out there with customers right now that hopefully we could start to talk about our $1 million customers sometime soon. But yeah.
So one of the common tensions within a SaaS business is sales potentially selling in advance of the roadmap, which is a fancy way of saying they sell things that don't exist yet. And then there's the engineering tension, where it's building new features, but also acknowledging that you got to retrofit some things, you got to redo some things, you got to knock out some technical debt. What have you seen in your business over time between that tension between sales and product development?
Again, seeing Hubert up here talking about it, and he was really funny, because he's like, hey, why can't we just build this one thing for this one customer that we're about to get, which was what I came to Hubert with every time I talked to a customer in the early days. We got to make this one thing, and in many ways, we built a lot of functionality that's our flagship functionality, where we sold it first and then made it afterwards. But I think the tension has to be there. If one side wins and one side is totally dominant, I think that's where you might get an unnatural balance. If engineering always wins and we're building everything perfect, and we never release software until it's completely bug-free, and we never sell anything other than what we have right now, then you might not make as much progress. You wouldn't get as much feedback. You wouldn't see the people who are voting with their dollars. You'd be making stuff for your own ideas. But then if you're on the other side, where sales just rules the earth, the whole direction of the product and whatever some company wants to show up and buy, that's what we make today, then you end up with a lot of spaghetti code that becomes unmaintainable, and it's not scalable, and sooner or later that's going to blow things up. Or it'll weigh you down to the point where you can't move forward. So I really think that there has to be some kind of delicate balance between the customers driving the product evolution, pushing, and then engineering having the brakes to be the checks and balances, to be like, hey, we need to slow down And especially in the, I guess, the middle days, we had to pay down a lot of technical debt. And so we had a lot of healthy, passionate debate on that topic. So I like the balance.
So for SaaS entrepreneurs, one of the things that we get excited about is recurring revenue and high gross margins and the predictability of the business model. But over time, what typically happens is there's an opportunity to help customers at a one-off level, not necessarily from an engineering point of view, but from a consulting and professional services perspective. And so Rigor recently added some professional services offerings. Mm-hmm. Take us through that thought process to go many, many, many years with no pro services at all to recently introducing it.
Yeah, so we had some pro services very, very early, and then like many software companies who are like, nope, we're not selling any services, we're only software. Log in, use the software, and send us a check. And it works, but when we sat and thought about what was the customer's experience, and if you're that customer and you're logging in, cool, some software does some features that I need, you don't really have an attachment to that software, so the human element is something that's really important for making a connection, but the software is never going to be perfect for everyone's workflow, and sometimes you have to augment that with humans doing things. And it's either we put the onus on the customer to do that, or we pick up some of the slack and do some professional services to help them get their job done. And in our case, with the professional services arm that we added, we call it Faster as a Service, where we go in and we help them be successful with optimizing their website for a performance standpoint and help them set up best practices for building in performance practices throughout their dev lifecycle. And we go in there and sort of teach them how to fish. And we find things, the customers are more successful. They have a better attachment to our company. They know who we are. And when they're more successful, all the metrics follow. So it was mainly driven by what's the right thing to do for the customer. And we figured out that, look, the right thing to do is to get somebody out there on staff to help them out sometimes. And so that's kind of why we spun it up. And we just started doing this last quarter, and we've seen a lot of good success. We've got a bunch of case studies that come out of it already. And we're really excited about it moving forward to scale that up as we scale.
That's awesome. So one of your recent hires is a new Chief Customer Officer.
Yeah.
So you don't see that title in the marketplace too often. Tell us about the thought process of hiring a Chief Customer Officer.
Yeah. You've met Francis a couple times, and so Francis Cordone is our Chief Customer Officer. He lives in New York City, and he actually trained me at my last company at CompuWare, and he was head of enablement and pre-sales, and then he went to another company and headed up delivery at this big software company called Turbonomic. But in between, he left, and he said he had this mindset, I'm always selling software. I want to go be implementing and making real progress inside of a company. So he went to go be the Chief Performance Officer at a top 10 bank called Bank of New York Mellon. And he had 70 people on his team and spent millions of dollars on performance software like ours, and they're a customer of ours as well. And we had always stayed in touch. We shared the philosophical ideal about how to deliver value to a customer and not just show up and drop off features on their desks. And so we've stayed in touch over the course of the past 7 or so years. And last year we added, talking about core values, like what Karen was talking about, we added a core value of customer first to our deck of values. And really the mantra is like, look, we got to do whatever is right for the customer, and then everything else good will follow. And when we started talking about that, he shared how he was unhappy with how other people were doing it, And we aligned so well about the way that we should be delivering value to customers and the experience that the customers should have. And that timing kind of worked out. That's sort of the story of how it became Francis, but the notion of having an executive at the table that represents and is the voice of the customer, like I don't know how you can be a customer-driven company without the voice of the customer in the room. From a symbolic level, once you get to a certain scale, right? You always have your marketing, sales, engineering, finance. Like who's talking for the customer? And I thought that the idea of bringing somebody in the room who represented the voice of the customer and had actually been on the other side of the table, had actually been the one hands on keyboard and leading teams doing the work. I just really liked the idea, and Francis was a perfect addition to our team, and he fit well with our culture. We knew who he was, and I don't know of a better person in this space, somebody who knows this space better than he did. So all that kind of came together, and that's how we ended up pulling him on board in the role of Chief Customer Officer, and it's been fantastic.
That's awesome. So most of the Rigor team is here in Atlanta, but you do have some remote employees, and Francis works remotely from New York. What are your thoughts as a SaaS entrepreneur of remote team members?
I guess on remote team, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. It works for Francis. It works for Chuck, who is a rep that we have who's out in Houston. And it worked for Eric when he was in LA and he came back to Atlanta. But I don't know that it would work all the time. You have to, it takes a certain type of person to work remote because there's a lot of added overhead that they have with communicating back with the mothership. They don't get to walk the halls. They don't get to have the serendipitous interactions and the water cooler talk and understand what's going on. So overall, I'm a big fan of having a centralized office, even though it might damage some productivity of cranking out widgets. I think the collaboration is important. But there are certain times when you need a certain type of person or a certain individual, and they are not in Atlanta. And we're willing to make that sacrifice when the person is the right person and has the ability to stay connected, put in the extra work to stay connected with the team and bring them back once a quarter, all those kinds of things.
That's great. So recently, Rigor won an Inc. 500 award for being one of the 500 fastest growing private companies in the United States. Tell us about your goals early on to win that award, and then the self-realization when you finally won it.
Yeah, so that had been a goal of mine since I was in college. I worked for some company that had an Inc. 500 picture on the wall, and I was like, what is that? And I went and Googled it, and was like, oh, I want one of those. And then 2007, which was a few years after college, Kyle Porter and I, who were pledge brothers in college, he's the founder of Saleslofts, CEO of Saleslofts, which is an awesome startup here in town. And we went to go see this guy who was giving a talk at ATDC for a tag event named David Cummings. I don't know if anybody's heard of him. And he gave a talk about how he bootstrapped an Inc. 500 company, talking about Hannon Hill. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. And who here doesn't want to be David Cummings when they grow up? So I had, as a written down goal for at least 10 years, that one day I want to start an Inc. 500 company. And to the point where every year I'd look at it and I'd start seeing the growth rates of what are the ones in the, what growth rate, what 3-year growth rate do you need to get Inc. 500? And I'd be doing the math of, okay, if we're at 260K this year, that means we have to do this much. And I'd start running all the formulas. And so I knew that we were pretty close to making the cut in 2016 once the dust settles and the number came in. And we got the award this year, which was super cool. So I got to check that box off the life goals list, which was really fun.
Very cool. All right, it's almost time to open it up for questions. But the last question for Craig before we do that, what's next with Rigor? Where do you go from here?
Got to improve every day. And the drum that we're, the mantra that we're going to is that we want to get to 20 million in 2020. And the reason why that's a significant number is we want to be a growth-based business, and always growth as a company, it brings change, it brings new opportunities for everybody in the company, and it brings growth for all the individuals that are in the business. And so we want to stay dynamic, we want to stay growing, and we want to stay improving. And 2020 or 20 in 2020 is kind of like the metric in the ground that we think if we're going at that rate, we know that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for a lot of people that are opening up. Long term, we want to build an established brand that lasts for a really long time. I mean, 20 years from now, I want Rigor to still be a company. I want it to, and the logo and the things that we've built, it should still exist. And so, there's the what's next, but there's also kind of like that long-term vision, And the long-term vision's like, it'd be awesome 20 years from now having reunions talking about the good old days, right? And so that's kind of where my head's at on that front.
All right, let's give it a round of applause. Love diving into the journey. Any questions on, all right, let's just dive straight into it.
Thanks. So you mentioned that you have you make a good product that's better than the competition, and your competition are normally bigger companies. So as they say, no one gets fired for hiring IBM. How do you go into these larger enterprise companies and make the case that or do you even make the case that you are a small company? Do you avoid the whole startup word completely? Or if you don't, then how do you make the case that you are better to these people that are used to more enterprise solutions?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And in many cases, or in some cases, we do compete against the IBMs of the world, or IBM. And it is challenging. I mean, the answer is kind of whatever it takes. Each company is different. Some people like to take bets on small startups, and some people like to go with the surefire thing. And so it's trying to figure out early on who are the type of people who are going to take bets on the small startups, and then we start to leverage those wins. And when we can put in a pile of case studies, hey, we have Home Depot, Ticketmaster, News Corp, Akamai, and we throw all these big logos. I'm sure you're probably more advanced than a top 10 bank, like our one of our customers, or reference the different customers. But it does take sort of get in where we fit in and get some early wins with people who would bet on you, like Matthew Swanson, wherever you are. Thank you for that. So he bought early at Sync, and he's been a Rigor customer for a while. But Matthew is a startup guy himself, and he was like, oh, I want to work with the innovators. And so we were able to leverage some of the wins and keep building from there. And sooner or later, now we have the proof, enough proof points that we can go to big customers and say, hey, we know what we're doing, kind of thing. So you find the people who would buy, and then leverage those people to get into the larger accounts.
Great. What do you think is the most common misconception about being the leader of an early stage tech company?
It's always glamorous all the time. You never have to do anything that's not fun.
Yeah, that is one of them, right? That it's, oh, you're a highfalutin leader. It's like, yeah, I got to deal with all the crap that nobody else wants to do. Take out the trash type stuff, whatever it takes. And there's, I'm sitting up here on stage. That's cool, but there's a lot of other things. I got the inbox filled with backlog of just a lot of stuff to do. There's a lot of work, actual work. Another one is that with successful startups, people will point to one successful startup and say, oh, that's how it is. Oh, David Cummings, he went and started Pardot, and 6 years later, sold it for $100 million bootstrapped, just like that, right? And nobody takes like knowing David for as long as I have, David started building software companies when he was 15 years old, right? And he had a successful startup in college, then he had another successful startup and kind of leveraged that and built Hand in Hill into Inc. 500 company, then had an idea, started Pardot, wasn't what he initially, it didn't have legs, they pivoted, then they went all in on Pardot, and then it started to take off, and then boom, you hear the story. And so you hear that narrative of, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, and I just started a company, and now I'm a billionaire. And the amount of work that goes into it, and the 15, I mean, how long have you been working on software businesses before you started Pardot?
13 years.
13 years, then 6 years to become that overnight success. And I mean, so that, yeah. So they say 10 years to be an overnight success. There's 19 years to be an overnight success. And so I think there's a lot of survivorship bias that think, oh, it's just a startup. That's it. And then we go be a billionaire. And there's a lot of work involved.
Okay.
I can hear you.
It's good to see you. So question, early on, one of Rigor's key differentiators was ease of use, and the app was just like great user experience compared to the legacy things you're competing against. Now you've got professional services layered on.
Yeah.
How has the professional services component changed the way that you prioritize feature developments, and has it affected the agility of your user experience in the product?
It's a good question. And so we focus on ease of use, but as you know, there were many user experience problems that we had. But it's, I guess, how do we prioritize? I don't think it's changed the way that we prioritize and think about it. We still want to make sure that we play nicely in their workflow, are very easy from a user's perspective to get up and running, and have always trying to shorten that time to value. And it's always going to be a balancing act with that. But hey, we have to release this new feature, and sometimes it doesn't work together. But the professional services gives us a closer look at what the customer is doing. We're actually on site watching them and working alongside of them. So I think it improves the feedback loop and helps us get closer to the customer. And so I think it's a positive thing in that direction.
Craig, I'm curious what your customer acquisition strategy was in the early days and how that's evolved over time as you've grown.
So customer acquisition in the early days, I would scrape lists off websites and guess email addresses and send them, reach out. And then when there were roadblocks about, hey, we would buy this, but it would need this one thing. And I'd go, okay, cool, we'll make that. And so it was reactive and kind of like a little bit scattered, where now it's super organized. So a lot of what we do is still outbound. And so Sarah and Pete are in the back of the room. Sarah leads sales development team, which is still kind of scraping lists and reaching out to the people that we think that would be good fits to use our software. But it's much more scientific. It's much more structured. We know how to turn the dials up and down. And we know that when Sarah's team hands over a lead over to the sales side, then we have the trust, and we know we have repeatability. We know kind of how to win deals. And so it's much more scientific now than reactive.
Advantages have you found from being in Atlanta or from being in the Tech Village?
Oh, awesome question. I really can't think of a better place to start a software company than in Atlanta. The cost of living here is so low compared to a lot of these other tech hubs. We go on CNN cost of living calculator and plug your salary in and see what it is equivalent to if you're in San Francisco, right? Everything's double. and the mindset of people in the South, they're genuine people, very community oriented. I mean, we have almost 200 people here in the afternoon to share and help each other. Like the South is very camaraderie driven, and so we've gotten a lot of feedback and help from, I see a lot of people along the way in the room. And there's a lot of really good talent here in Atlanta. I'm biased to Georgia Tech because I went there, but it attracts a lot of really good talent. And so all the things that make Atlanta great is the Atlanta Tech Village is a dense microcosm of that, right? You have a lot of great people with a lot of talent, all walking the halls trying to help each other out all the time. And I just can't think of a better place to start a company and scale it up than in Atlanta Tech Village. I think it's awesome.
Great. 2 more questions, Pierre.
Okay, so I'm a tech startup founder, and I wanted your opinion on this. And I actually asked Hubert his opinion also. And basically, what would you do if you created a product in an industry that doesn't exist, and you are one of 2 companies that are trying to create the industry, and your only competitor has just received $16 million in VC funding?
Yeah, so what are you trying to do if you're going after something new that never has been done before, but somebody is heavily funded? Is that somebody else is going in that direction? I'm going to answer this question like I'm talking to my friend. If something has never been, this is my reaction to kind of like the new companies, so bear with my bluntness. But if something has not been done before, there's probably a reason. Like there aren't really new business models that become successful. Like, so I don't really believe in hey, we're gonna invent this thing that nobody's ever done, and it's gonna be awesome. Everybody's gonna change it. I don't like to think that way. So I don't like going after a market that nobody's served before. I always like to think of something like Airbnb. Oh, it's like hotels, but a marketplace or something like that. It's always like a tilt to a business model that has already been done and already been proven. But I mean, if somebody you are competing with got heavily funded, that is what happens. Just go beat them and go win.
So you talked a lot about building a company that's successful. You start with one key customer success, and that hopefully leads to the next one, and those case studies sort of build on each other, and hopefully to the moment of triumph. How do you get that first big logo to let them use their logo? When they don't want to, and they have a policy against it.
Oh, yeah. We have gotten legal advice to just put it on the website. Thanks, Wade. He's like, sometimes they'll tell you to take it down, and they do. They'll let you know. But, we just kind of told all the stories anyways, and some people didn't like that, and they let us know. But now we're more structured about it. We wouldn't do that. Well.
All right.
We don't normally do that now.
Well, let's end it there. Let's give a big round of applause to Craig and David.